Good God. She's eating garbage to stay alive? William Harrington rubbed his eyes, then looked down again through the one-way glass of the executive office. Good God, he murmured, his voice so low it almost disappeared beneath the hum of the air conditioner. She's digging through the trash. He narrowed his eyes, as if looking harder might make the scene below vanish. But it did not. The young woman in a Harrington Chicken and Grill uniform was still crouched beside the dumpster behind the restaurant, her trembling hands turning over paper bags and grease-stained cardboard boxes. William swallowed hard. No. His voice tightened. Not trash. Leftovers. She's looking for leftover food to eat. For a moment, William told himself he was simply exhausted. Maybe a long day of revenue reports, operating costs, and lifeless numbers had tricked his eyes. But the scene below was too real, too cold, too painful. I'll call security, sir. His assistant, Mark Ellison, stepped closer to the glass. Mark was about 40, his tie neatly knotted, a tablet in one hand while the other reached for his phone. He glanced down into the alley, saw the girl beside the dumpster, and immediately opened the quick dial screen. William turned his head. Security? Yes, sir. She shouldn't be in the back area. If she gets hurt, or takes something unsafe, it becomes a liability issue. William did not answer right away. He only looked down. The restaurant below was one of Harrington Chicken and Grill's best-performing locations in Cleveland. That was why he had come there tonight, in person. He wanted to review the closing procedures, the staff's attitude, the speed of service, and the remaining inventory. He wanted to know why this branch kept reporting costs far below the company average. Now, he was beginning to understand. Wait, William said. Mark froze, his thumb still hovering over the call button. Sir? I said wait. Down in the alley, Annie Carter moved with great care. The wall lamp above the delivery door flickered in the cold wind. Dirty snow had hardened into gray streaks along the edge of the pavement. The smell of old grease, wet cardboard, and spilled soda rose from the open dumpster. Annie pulled her sleeve over her fingers before touching anything. Her hands were already red and raw from dish soap, floor cleaner, and sanitizer. But she was still trying to keep herself as clean as she could, even here, even in a moment no one should ever have to witness. She glanced quickly toward the back door, then toward the mouth of the alley. No one was there. Only then did she crouch lower and reach into the narrow space between two oil-stained cardboard boxes wedged against the side of the dumpster. William leaned closer to the glass. Annie pulled gently, then harder. A brown paper bag slid free. One corner crushed, but the top still folded shut. She held it in both hands, not like trash, not like something shameful, but as if she had finally found something she had been searching for a long time. She opened the top just enough to look inside. A chicken burger, whole, still wrapped, untouched. Annie went still. Hunger had clung to her all day. It had stayed with her while she wiped ketchup from tables, gathered dirty trays, scrubbed dried sauce from the counter, and listened to the manager say the payroll system had run into one small issue. It tightened even more when she thought of Mrs. Ruth waiting at home in their cold little apartment, with a weak cup of tea and a nearly empty bottle of medicine. Annie had worked nearly 11 hours that day. She had not eaten anything, not because she did not want to, but because she had told herself that once she received her paycheck, she would buy bread, eggs, and maybe a small carton of milk if the price had not gone up again. But Vance Miller had stood in the manager's office with that lazy smile on his face and told her that her paycheck was not ready. When she asked why, he gave 3 different answers: a missing signature, a timesheet that had not been approved, a system review. Then, when she refused to lower her voice, refused to smile, refused to pretend his comments in the storage area were harmless, he finally said what he had wanted to say all along. If you're that hungry, the dumpster is right outside. Annie had not argued anymore. She had simply picked up her backpack, swallowed her tears, and walked out through the back door. From above, William had seen her leave the restaurant with her head bowed, her old backpack held close to her body. Now, he was seeing the real consequence of what had happened inside. Annie lifted the paper bag near her face and blew softly at the dirt clinging to the folded edge. She looked at the burger inside one more time. Then she did something that made William's throat tighten. She did not eat. She used her sleeve to wipe the dirt from the outside of the paper bag. Slowly, carefully, she smoothed the wrinkles in the paper with her palm, as if it were not food pulled from a dumpster, but a gift worth protecting. Only then did she open her torn backpack and place the burger inside as gently as someone setting down something fragile. William's jaw tightened. A broken breath escaped him, half disbelief, half pain. "Is she one of ours?" he asked. Mark looked at the girl again, then quickly swiped across his tablet. "Possibly, sir. Tonight's closing shift has 4 hourly employees. 1 female employee is listed on the schedule." "Annie Carter. Annie Carter," William repeated. "New hire, team member, part-time." William still did not take his eyes off her. Part-time employees should not be clocking out close to 11 at night after an exhausting day of work. Mark checked the schedule again. "She clocked in late this morning." William turned fully toward him. "Late this morning?" "Yes, sir. And now she is standing behind my restaurant, looking for food in my dumpster?" Mark had no answer. Below, Annie kept searching. Not frantically, not greedily. She moved cautiously, as if every action needed permission. She pushed a crushed cardboard box aside and found a second bag. But when she opened it, the food inside had already been bitten. She quietly folded it closed and put it back where it had been. She saw fries scattered across a paper tray, but did not touch them. She found a sealed cup of sauce, wiped the outside clean, and slipped it into the side pocket of her backpack. Every choice she made was careful. Every movement carried a shame she did not deserve. William thought of the company slogan printed on the wall downstairs: family, service, respect. Years ago, he had approved those words in a marketing meeting, over hot coffee and sandwiches. Back then, he had liked the way they sounded. Sincere, warm, American. But now, one of his employees was crouched beside a dumpster, searching for dinner. "Don't call anyone," William said. Mark lowered the phone. "Sir, if she is taking food from the waste area, technically, as a human being, she worked hard enough to deserve it." Mark fell silent. William was already heading for the door. "We should confirm what happened before you go down there," Mark said quickly. William did not turn back. "That is exactly what I'm going to do." Down below, Annie zipped up her backpack and slowly stood. Her knees ached. Her stomach still cramped. But at least the burger was safe in her bag. She would take it home. She would share it with Mrs. Ruth. Maybe they could warm it in a pan if the gas stove still worked. Maybe they would make a little tea to soften the bread. It was not much, but it would be enough to get through one more night. She had taken only one step toward the mouth of the alley when the back door swung open. Vance Miller stepped outside, a cigarette held between 2 fingers, his manager badge still pinned to his shirt. He saw Annie. Then his eyes dropped to the hand gripping her backpack strap. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, look at that," he said. "Too proud to be nice to me, but not too proud to eat out of the trash." Annie stopped breathing for half a second. Vance stepped down from the stoop and kicked the side of the dumpster with the toe of his shoe. The metal rang sharply in the cold. Annie flinched. Before she could move away, he kicked it again, harder this time. The lid jumped, a cardboard box fell out, and a paper tray slid across the wet concrete near her feet. "What did you find in there, Annie?" he asked. "Dinner or your dignity?" She tightened her grip on the backpack strap. "Please," she said quietly, "just let me go home." Vance laughed and stepped closer. "What are you taking home?" Annie backed away, but the alley wall was only a few steps behind her. Her fingers dug into the strap of her backpack as if that old bag were the last thing in the world she still had the power to protect. "Nothing," she said. "It had already been thrown away." "Then I'm sure you won't mind showing me." He reached out and grabbed the top handle of her backpack. Annie jerked back at once, panic flashing across her tired face. "No, please." That pleased Vance. She saw it in the curl of his mouth, in the sharpness of his eyes when he realized that the bag meant something to her. "Oh," he said softly, "so there is something inside. Let go. That hungry, huh?" He tugged harder, not enough to take the bag, but enough to force her to pull back, holding on this tight to a discarded burger. "I didn't know you were that pathetic." Annie hugged the backpack to her chest. Her voice trembled, but it stayed low. "It isn't yours anymore. You threw it away." Vance leaned forward, enjoying every second. "Do you hear yourself?" Begging over trash? I'm not begging. You look like you are. He yanked the bag again. The seam near the zipper tore with a sharp sound. Annie clutched the backpack with both hands, terrified the burger would fall onto the wet ground. Terrified he would take it and throw it back into the dumpster simply because he could. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked fast to hold them back. Please, she whispered. It's all I have tonight. Vance's smile widened. All you have, he repeated. God, Annie, you really are desperate. He pulled at the bag one more time. Then another voice came from behind him. That's enough. Vance spun around. William Harrington stood beneath the cold alley light, a long dark coat over his expensive suit, with Mark a few steps behind him. Vance's hand immediately slipped off Annie's backpack. Mr. Harrington, he said, his expression changing so quickly it was almost sickening. Sir, I can explain. William did not look at him first. He looked at Annie. He looked at her reddened hands, her thin coat, the backpack pressed tightly against her chest, the way she stood, as though one more cruel word might shatter something inside her. Then he looked at the dumpster, at the food his company had sold all day and thrown away at night. At last, he looked at Vance. I hope you can explain, William said, his calm voice more frightening than anger, because I would very much like to know why one of my employees worked nearly 11 hours, then ended her shift fighting her manager over a burger pulled from the trash. Vance let go of the backpack as if it had burned his hand. A few seconds earlier, he had been laughing, enjoying the fear on Annie's face as if it were some kind of after-shift entertainment. But now, with William Harrington standing right outside the back door, that smile vanished. His mouth opened, then closed again. Excuses crowded in his throat, but none of them were fast enough, clean enough, or convincing enough to save him from the scene his boss had just witnessed with his own eyes. Sir, this isn't what it looks like, Vance said quickly. She took discarded products without permission. I was only handling it according to policy. William remained still in the doorway. The cold light above him fell across his face, making his expression even harder to read. Handling it according to policy? He asked. Yes, sir. That is store policy. Employees are not allowed to take anything from the waste area. For sanitation reasons, liability concerns, all of that. Annie held the backpack tightly against her chest. Her fingers ached from gripping it for so long, but she still did not dare let go. Inside was only a cold burger and a small cup of sauce. But at that moment, it felt like her entire dinner, Mrs. Ruth's dinner, and the last little bit of hope she had to get through the night. The cold had already seeped through her thin coat. But what made her tremble was not the wind. It was shame. Being hungry was painful enough. Having someone see her hungry enough to search for food in a dumpster was worse. William looked at her. What is your name? Vance answered at once. Annie Carter. She's a new employee. Still learning procedures. William's eyes did not leave Annie. I asked her. Vance fell silent. Annie swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry, and she did not know whether it was from hunger, the cold, or the fear pressing heavily against her chest. Annie, she said softly. Annie, William repeated, his voice gentled slightly. Did you work today? She gave a small nod. How long? Annie's lips parted, but at first no sound came out. Inside that building, Vance had planted too much fear in her. One wrong answer could cost her a shift. One objection could make next week's schedule disappear. One truth spoken in front of someone powerful could become a reason for people to call her a troublemaker. She worked a standard shift. Vance cut in quickly, maybe picked up a few extra tasks, but nothing unusual. William turned to Mark. Pull up her time record. Mark immediately lowered his gaze to the tablet, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Vance shifted his weight, his expression tightening. Sir, payroll can explain this more clearly in the morning, he said. The system has been glitching all week. William looked at him. So she hasn't been paid? Annie looked down at the wet concrete. The toes of her shoes were worn thin. One sock had slipped under her heel and bunched inside her shoe, but she was too tired to fix it. A drop of dirty water fell from the dumpster lid near her foot. She stepped back half a step, still holding the backpack as if someone might snatch it away. She nodded very faintly. Mark found the file. Clock-in time, 11:42 a.m. Clock-out time, 10:48 p.m. William's face tightened. Almost 11 hours. Mark continued reading. The record shows she took a meal break at 4:15. Annie's head snapped up. I didn't take one. Vance let out a small laugh, but it died the moment William looked at him. She probably forgot, Vance said. New employees mix these things up all the time. I didn't forget, Annie said. Her voice was weak, but there was still a thread of firmness underneath it. You said we were short-staffed. You told me to keep working, and that I could eat after closing. William looked at Vance. Did she eat after closing? Vance raised both hands. I can't monitor every bite my employees take. No, Annie said more quietly. You told me to come out here. The words fell into the alley like something sharp. No one spoke for several seconds. Vance's jaw clenched. William took one step closer. Why was her pay withheld? Vance blinked. That issue hasn't been processed yet. It's pending approval. Why? Paperwork issue. What paperwork? I need to check. Check now. Vance glanced at Mark, then toward the back door, as if a suitable lie might be waiting somewhere inside the manager's office. Her timesheet was missing a signature. Annie shook her head immediately. I signed it. Twice. Last Friday. And again today. Vance snapped his gaze toward her. Annie, this is not the time to exaggerate. William's voice cut through, cold and clear. Do not speak to her in that tone. Vance stepped back at once. Of course, sir. I only mean she may be mistaken. A lot of new employees don't understand payroll procedures. Mark was still reading from the tablet. Her file is complete. I see a manual hold placed on 2 pay periods. William looked at him. By whom? Mark hesitated. William's command was brief. Say it. The branch manager, Mark answered. Vance Miller. Annie closed her eyes for a moment. She had known. Of course she had known. But hearing the truth spoken aloud in front of other people still made her stomach tighten, as if someone had squeezed it in their fist. 2 paychecks. 2 paychecks she had waited for. 2 paychecks she had counted on dollar by dollar, skipping meals, delaying medicine, walking extra stops to save bus fare. William asked, how much is she owed? Mark checked quickly. Base pay, overtime adjustments, closing hours. I'll need payroll to calculate the exact corrections, but the unpaid amount is significant for an hourly employee. For Annie, William said. Not for an hourly employee. For her, Annie's face burned. She did not want her poverty weighed and measured in front of others. She did not want anyone to know that a withheld paycheck could empty her refrigerator, could force Mrs. Ruth's medicine to be stretched pill by pill, could leave her standing in front of a dumpster telling herself that surviving was not something to be ashamed of. If Annie's pain touched your heart, please like this video. Comment where you are watching from, because someone near you might be watching this story too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories. William seemed to understand enough not to ask more in front of Vance. He only asked, Annie, has Mr. Miller ever made you uncomfortable at work? Annie's hands tightened. Vance immediately stepped forward. Sir, I really don't think. William turned to him. I wasn't asking you. Annie could hear her own breathing. She thought of the cramped storage room, where Vance had once blocked the shelf of spare cups. She thought of the way he had complimented her eyes while she was trying to count sauce packets. She thought of jokes that made her stomach turn. She thought of her schedule changing after she stopped forcing herself to laugh at him. She thought of the paycheck he had spun between his fingers like bait. She wanted to say all of it, but she also wanted to keep her job. She wanted to go home. She wanted to warm up the cold burger. She wanted to sit at the kitchen table with Mrs. Ruth and pretend tonight had never happened. So in the end, she only said, I just want my paycheck. William's expression changed, not with disappointment, but with something much heavier, understanding. All right, he said. Vance seized the opportunity at once. You see, sir, this is just a payroll misunderstanding. I'll handle it first thing Monday morning. Today is Thursday, William said. Yes, but company payroll procedures. Mark, William cut in. Contact payroll immediately. Emergency adjustment. Full payment of everything withheld. Review all overtime. Add any penalties and compensation required under company policy. Tonight. Mark nodded and stepped aside to make the call. Vance's face went stiff. Sir, honestly, that would set a bad precedent. William looked at him for a long time. Paying people for work they have already done sets a bad precedent? That's not what I meant. I understand exactly what you meant. Annie lowered the backpack slightly. Her arms ached. The burger inside suddenly felt heavier than a burger should. Heavy with hunger. Heavy with humiliation. Heavy with all the nights she had told herself she only had to get through one more day. William walked over to the dumpster and looked inside. He saw limp fries scattered everywhere, torn wrappers, half-eaten sandwiches, paper trays soaked with soda and grease. Then he turned back to Vance. You told her to eat from this? Vance glanced quickly at Annie. It was just a joke. Annie whispered. It didn't sound like one. William heard her. So did Vance. Just a joke, William repeated, his voice lowering. You withheld her pay, made her work through her meal break, sent her out hungry, then laughed when she tried to take home food we had already thrown away. Vance's voice weakened. Sir, I've managed this location for 7 years. Our numbers are very strong. Yes, William said. I have seen those numbers. He took another step toward him. And now I know what they cost. Mark returned from the other side of the alley. Payroll is processing the adjustment. They need authorization from your office to release the payment immediately. They have it. Yes, sir. William turned to Annie. Tonight, you will receive what belongs to you. Not Monday, not after another excuse. Annie nodded. She wanted to say thank you, but if she opened her mouth, she was afraid she would cry. Vance tried again. Mr. Harrington, I understand this looks bad, but if we encourage this kind of behavior, William raised one hand, and Vance stopped at once. What happens next is simple, William said. You are suspended effective immediately. You will turn over your keys, employee card, and access codes to Diane when she arrives. You are not to contact Annie. You are not to contact any employee about what happened tonight. If you do, you will be held responsible for that as well. Vance went pale. Suspended? Over a burger? William's eyes turned ice cold. No, over cruelty. For the first time, Vance had nothing to say. Annie stood in the cold, her torn backpack pressed against her thin coat, waiting for some condition to follow. She was used to every form of help coming with a price, an extra shift, a forced smile, silence at the right moment, a lowered head so someone else could feel satisfied. But William gave no condition. He only asked, Do you have a way to get home? The bus, Annie answered. At this hour? I always do. The answer made her sound more pitiful than she had meant to. William nodded once, then turned to Mark. Call a car for her. No company logo. No press. No one turns this into a performance. Just get her home safely. Annie quickly shook her head. I can take the bus. I know you can, William said. But tonight, you don't have to. She looked at him, still unsure. In her eyes was the exhaustion of someone who had been surviving on her own for so long that she no longer knew how to accept kindness without fear. William added, And the food in your bag, keep it. Annie's eyes dropped to the backpack. It had already been thrown away, she said softly, as if she still needed to defend herself. William looked at the dumpster once more, then back at her. But you were not. Mark returned with a black sedan waiting at the edge of the alley. Its headlights washed softly over the wet pavement, catching the steam that rose from the restaurant vents and the gray slush pushed against the curb. Annie did not move toward it right away. A car like that did not usually stop for girls in thin coats with grease on their sleeves. It passed them, splashed them, or waited for them to cross faster. William noticed her hesitation. No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go. I know, she said, though she did not know. Not really. Mark opened the rear door and stepped back. Driver's name is Paul. He'll take you straight home. No stops unless you ask. Annie shifted her backpack higher on her shoulder. I don't have money for this. It's covered, William said. She looked at him then. Tired eyes, guarded face. Covered by who? By the man who should have known what was happening in his own store. That answer seemed to unsettle her more than a simple lie would have. Annie had dealt with mean people, careless people, people who handed her advice instead of help. She was not used to a rich man admitting fault without wrapping it in pretty words. Vance stood a few feet away, arms at his sides, no longer smoking. His cigarette had gone out between his fingers. Every part of him looked smaller without the office door behind him. William turned to him. Inside. Keys on the desk. Badge too. Mark will wait with you until Diane arrives. Mr. Harrington, please, Vance said, lowering his voice. I've given years to this company, and tonight I saw what you did with the power we gave you. Vance looked past William toward Annie. There was anger in his face now, the kind that promised memory. Annie felt it and stepped back. William saw that too. Don't look at her. This is between you and the choices you made. Vance's mouth tightened, but he went inside with Mark behind him. The alley felt wider after the door closed. Annie stood under the cold light, still not sure what to do with her hands. The backpack strap had cut a line into her palm. She flexed her fingers once, then held them still. William kept a respectful distance. Do you want someone to walk you to the car? No, she said quickly, then softened it. I mean, I can walk. All right. She took 2 steps, stopped, and turned back toward the dumpster. For one strange second, she wondered if she should put the burger back. Maybe keeping it would make her look guilty. Maybe accepting the ride and taking the food was too much. Maybe everything in life had a hook hidden under it. William followed her glance. Annie, she looked at him. You worked today. You were hungry. You took food we had already decided to throw away. Don't carry shame that was handed to you by someone who owed you better. Her eyes lowered. People say things like that when they don't know how it feels. You're right, he said. She had not expected that. William put his hands into his coat pockets. His breath showed faintly in the air. I don't know how tonight felt for you. I won't pretend I do. Annie nodded once, because that was easier than answering. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out. The screen was cracked across the corner, but the notification was clear enough. Payroll deposit pending. The amount made her blink. She turned the phone slightly as if the number might change if she looked from another angle. William saw the shift in her face. Is it there? Pending, she said. It says pending. It will clear. Annie pressed her lips together. She had imagined this moment all day. Thought she would feel relief when the money came. Instead, she felt emptied out, as if her body had held itself tight for so long it did not know how to loosen. I should be happy, she said almost to herself. No, William said. You should have been paid without having to go through this. The rear door opened again. Mark stepped out alone. Diane is 10 minutes away. Vance is in the office. Good, William said. Get every time record for this location. Last 90 days. Manual edits, missed breaks, late payments, manager overrides. Mark glanced toward Annie, then back to William. Tonight? Tonight. Yes, sir. And pull the camera footage from the hallway, office door, storage area, and back exit for the last month. Annie's head lifted at that. Why the storage area? William did not push the question back at her. He only said, because men who misuse power rarely do it in just one place. She held the phone tighter. Mark nodded and went back inside. The sedan waited. Annie walked to it slowly, opened the door herself before the driver could get out, and slid into the back seat. The heat touched her face, and for a second it almost hurt. The leather seat felt too clean for her uniform. She kept her backpack on her lap, both hands over the zipper. William leaned slightly toward the open door, not close enough to crowd her. Will your grandmother be awake? Annie's eyes flicked up. How did you know I live with my grandmother? You mentioned her medicine. Oh. She looked down again. She'll be awake. She waits up when I close. Tell her payroll has been corrected. Tell her there will be an investigation. And tell her I'm sorry. Annie gave a tired, humorless breath. You want me to tell my grandmother a billionaire said sorry? If she doesn't believe it, I don't blame her. That almost drew a smile from Annie, but it faded before it formed. She'll ask if sorry pays rent. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. The driver asked for the address. Annie gave it softly. East Side. 3rd floor. Brick building with the broken buzzer. She hated how much an address could reveal, how fast people could hear a neighborhood and decide what kind of life must be inside it. William did not react to the address. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Before the car pulled away, Annie said, "Mr. Harrington? Yes? Am I fired after this?" The question landed on him with more weight than anger would have. "No," he said. "You're not fired. Vance said I was still new. He said people like me are easy to replace." William's face changed. People who say that usually know they are the ones who should be replaced. Annie looked through the open door toward the restaurant. The sign above the back entrance hummed faintly. She had walked in that morning hoping only to make it through another shift and leave with what she earned. Now everything felt cracked open. "I don't want everybody talking about me," she said. "I'll do what I can to protect your privacy. You own the company." "I do, and tonight showed me ownership is not the same as knowing." She did not answer. The driver eased the car forward, then stopped at the alley mouth for traffic. Annie looked back once. William was still standing there, coat collar lifted against the cold, no longer looking like a man visiting a profitable store. He looked like a man who had found a bill left unpaid for years and finally seen his name at the bottom. The car turned onto the street. For the first few blocks, Annie kept the backpack clutched to her chest. Cleveland passed outside enclosed storefronts, bus shelters, patches of old snow, apartment windows lit with late-night television. Her phone buzzed again. Payroll deposit completed. This time the number stayed. Annie covered her mouth with the back of her hand. She did not sob. She was too tired for that. One tear slipped free, then another. She wiped them away fast, embarrassed though no one in the car was looking at her. Paul, the driver, kept his eyes on the road. After a while, he said, "He'd okay back there, miss?" Annie nodded before remembering he could not see her well. "Yes, sir. Thank you. No problem." That small courtesy nearly broke her more than Vance's cruelty had. "Sir. Miss. Thank you." Ordinary words. Human words. She had gone so long on orders and warnings that simple respect felt unfamiliar. At the apartment building, Paul pulled to the curb and waited while Annie got out. The front steps had not been salted. She moved carefully, one hand on the rail, the other on the backpack. The hallway smelled of old carpet and someone frying onions behind a closed door. The elevator had been out for months, so she climbed to the third floor, each step reminding her how long she had been on her feet. Grandma Ruth opened the door before Annie could knock twice. She wore her blue robe, the one with a sleeve mended at the elbow, and held the chain lock in place until she saw Annie's face. "Baby," Ruth said, sliding the chain free. "What happened to you?" Annie stepped inside. The apartment was small and cold around the edges. A lamp burned on the kitchen table. Beside it sat the empty pill bottle, turned on its side. Annie set the backpack down with care. She took out the paper bag, still smoothed flat from where her sleeve had wiped it clean. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I got paid, Grandma." Ruth looked from the bag to Annie's face. "And this?" Annie touched the top of the bag. "Dinner." Ruth did not ask where it came from. Not yet. She only reached for Annie's hands. Saw the redness, the trembling, the marks left by the backpack strap. Then the old woman pulled her close. Annie stood stiff for 1 second, then folded into her grandmother's arms, still holding herself together by will alone. Ruth rubbed her back and spoke near her ear. "Come sit down. Whatever they did to you today, they don't get to follow you all the way home." Ruth guided Annie to the kitchen chair and turned on the small stove burner. The apartment had the kind of cold that did not leave just because the windows were shut. It lived in the corners, under the door, around the old pipes. Annie kept her coat on. Her knees ached from the shift, and now that she was home, the strength she had used to stand in the alley seemed to drain out of her all at once. Ruth filled the kettle halfway. "You sit. Don't argue. I'm okay. You are not okay. You are standing like a broom with a soul." Annie gave a weak breath that was almost a laugh, but it broke before it became one. She placed the paper bag on the table. The burger inside had cooled, but the bag still held the smell of chicken and bread. Ruth looked at it, then looked at Annie's face again. "Tell me." Annie rubbed her thumb over a tear in the tablecloth. "I got paid." "That's not what I asked." The kettle began to click softly over the flame. Annie stared at the paper bag because it was easier than looking at Ruth. "Vance wouldn't give me my check." said payroll had a problem. Then he said my paperwork was wrong. Then he said if I was hungry, the trash was outside. Ruth's hand stopped on the kettle handle. Annie kept going before she lost the nerve. I went out back. I didn't want to. I stood there for a while. I thought about coming home with nothing, but you needed medicine, and I hadn't eaten, and I just... She swallowed. There was a burger. It was still wrapped. I was going to bring it home. Ruth pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly. The robe fell around her thin wrists. Did he see you? Vance did. Annie's voice grew smaller. He came out smoking. He kicked the dumpster and tried to take my bag. Ruth's eyes sharpened. He put his hands on you? On the bag. That is close enough. Then Mr. Harrington came out. Ruth leaned back a little. Harrington, as in Harrington chicken? Annie nodded. The man on the cups? Yes, ma'am. What was he doing there? I don't know. He was upstairs. He saw me from some office. Annie looked at the bag again. He made Vance let go. He checked my hours. Vance was holding my pay. On purpose. Ruth closed her eyes for a moment, and the lines around her mouth deepened. I knew that man was crooked. You never met him. I met enough men like him. Annie's phone lay on the table between them. She tapped the screen and showed the deposit. Ruth put on her reading glasses, squinted at the number, then looked at Annie. That's yours? It cleared in the car. And he sent you home in a car? Yes. Ruth studied her. Did he ask anything from you? No. Did he touch you? No. Did he talk down to you? Annie thought about that. No. He said I shouldn't thank him for paying what was already mine. Ruth's face changed then. Not softened exactly, but eased a little. Well, that's the first sensible thing I've heard tonight. The kettle began to whistle. Ruth stood before Annie could stop her, made 2 cups of tea, and took a knife from the drawer. Annie opened the paper bag and unwrapped the burger. It was a little flattened on one side, but still whole. Ruth cut it cleanly in half on a plate with a blue rim. Annie pushed the larger half toward her grandmother. Ruth pushed it back. Don't start that. You need to eat. So do you. I ate at work. Ruth's eyes lifted. Annie looked away. Annie Carter, Ruth said, quiet but firm. I had water. Ruth said nothing for a few seconds. That was worse than scolding. Then she slid the larger half back to Annie and kept the smaller piece for herself. Eat before I get angry. Annie picked up the burger. Her hands shook so badly that a piece of lettuce fell onto the plate. She took a bite. Slow at first, then another. Hunger made her want to hurry, but shame made her careful. Ruth saw both and let her eat without comment. After a while, Ruth said, You know what your mother used to say when she was tired? Annie shook her head. She'd say, Lord, don't let my bad day turn me into somebody mean. Ruth wrapped both hands around her tea. That Vance man had too many bad days or too many easy ones. Either way, he chose mean. Annie chewed and forced herself to swallow. I kept thinking maybe I did something wrong. You did work and asked to be paid. He made it sound like I was being difficult. People who steal your peace will always call you difficult when you ask for it back. Annie looked at her grandmother then. Ruth's hair was wrapped in a scarf. Her face tired. Her body too small inside the robe. But her eyes still had that old strength, the kind that came from laundries, hospital basements, bus stops before sunrise, and years of saying yes to survival without letting it take her manners. I was so embarrassed, Annie said. When Mr. Harrington saw me. Why? I was in the trash, Grandma. Ruth set her cup down. Listen to me. Shame does not start with the person reaching for food. It starts with the person who made food the only thing left to reach for. Annie's eyes filled again, and this time she let the tears stay. Ruth reached across the table and placed her hand over Annie's. You are not dirty because you were hungry. You are not less because somebody cruel found a way to make you feel small. And you are not going back there tomorrow like nothing happened. Annie wiped her cheek with her sleeve. I need the job. I know. Rent is due next week. I know that too. And if I quit, Vance wins. Ruth leaned back, considering her. Then don't quit. But don't go back alone inside yourself. There's a difference. Annie did not answer because she was not sure she knew how to do that. For months she had gone to work with her head down, thinking if she did everything right, trouble would pass her by. But trouble had learned her name anyway. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at Ruth. "Answer it," Ruth said. Annie pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello? Annie? This is Diane Whitaker, district manager for Harrington Chicken and Grill. I'm sorry to call so late." Annie sat straighter. "Yes, ma'am. I'm at the store now. Mr. Harrington asked me to confirm you got home safely, and that payroll went through." "It did. I'm glad. I also want you to know Vance has been removed from the schedule pending investigation. You are not expected to report to him, speak to him, or answer any message from him." Annie glanced at Ruth, who watched her closely. Diane continued, her voice more careful now. "I would like to meet with you tomorrow, somewhere you feel comfortable. The store, the regional office, or by phone. You can bring someone with you. What is this about? Your pay, your hours, and anything else you believe we need to know." Annie tightened her grip on the phone. The storage room came back to her. Vance's voice. His hand too close. The schedule cut. After she refused him, she looked at Ruth, who gave a small nod, not pushing, just standing with her from across the table. "I can talk tomorrow," Annie said, "but not at the store." "That's fine. Where would you prefer?" Annie looked around the apartment. The weak lamp. The cold window. The plate with 2 halves of a rescued burger. She thought of how much of her life had been spent trying not to be seen in places like this. "The public library on East 105th, she said. "There are tables in the back. I'll be there at 10. And Annie?" "Yes? I'm sorry this happened." Annie looked at the paper bag on the table, smoothed flat now, no longer hiding in a backpack. "Thank you," she said, though the words felt too small. When she hung up, Ruth reached for the empty pill bottle and shook it once. "Tomorrow morning, we get this filled. Then we go to that library. You don't have to come." "I know. Grandma." Ruth gave her a look over the top of her glasses. "Baby, I have sat in hospital billing offices, landlord offices, school offices, and one courthouse hallway with a woman screaming into a payphone beside me. I can sit in a library while somebody learns how to tell the truth." Annie let out a tired laugh, and this time it made it all the way through. Later, after Ruth went to bed, Annie stayed at the kitchen table. She folded the paper bag carefully and placed it beside her GED workbook. She did not know why she kept it. Maybe because it had held the worst part of the night and the first proof that she had survived it. Across town, William Harrington sat alone in the small executive office above the restaurant. The reports were still spread across the desk. But he was no longer reading profits. He was reading time edits, meal breaks, manager overrides, the little hidden places where a company could hurt people and still look successful. By 2:13 inches the morning, he found Annie's name again. Then another name. Then another. He leaned back and thought of the girl in the alley holding a torn backpack as if it were the last door between her and the world. The problem was no longer Vance Miller. Vance was only the first name on the page. By morning, the snow along the curb had hardened into gray ridges, and the city had the tired look it wore after a cold night. Annie woke before the alarm because her body was used to doing that. For a few seconds she forgot. Then the kitchen came back to her, the paper bag folded beside her GED workbook, the deposit on her phone, the sound of Vance's voice by the dumpster, and William Harrington standing in the alley like a man who had arrived too late to a truth he should have known. Ruth was already awake. Annie found her at the stove, heating water in the small dented kettle. She had on her church coat over her house dress, the good one with the missing button near the wrist. "You're dressed," Annie said. "So are you. I haven't even changed." "Then you're halfway ready." Annie leaned against the doorframe. Her legs still hurt from the shift. Her hands looked worse in daylight, rough and red around the knuckles. Ruth saw them and slid a jar of petroleum jelly across the counter. "Put that on." "I'm fine." "Annie." She opened the jar and rubbed some over her hands. The grease smell from work still lived in her sleeves. She had washed twice, but it clung the way bad treatment did, deep in the fabric. They took the bus to the pharmacy first. Ruth insisted on paying for 2 senior discount newspapers from the rack by the door, though Annie told her they needed to save money. Ruth said an old woman had a right to know what kind of foolishness the world was doing before noon. Annie bought the medicine, a loaf of bread, a dozen eggs, and a small bag of oranges because Ruth had once told her citrus made winter less bossy. At 9:52, they reached the public library on East 105th. The building was warm, smelling faintly of old paper, floor wax, and coffee from someone's travel mug. A few retirees sat near the front reading newspapers. A man in a Brown's cap worked a crossword puzzle with serious attention. Ruth nodded to the librarian like they were entering church. "Morning," Ruth said. "Good morning, Miss Carter," the librarian answered. "Cold one today. Cold enough to make a person repent." The librarian smiled. Annie almost smiled too. There was comfort in how Ruth belonged in ordinary places. She had spent a lifetime making small greetings into shelter. Diane Whitaker was already at a table in the back, a folder beside her, no laptop open, no lawyer with her. She stood when they approached. "Annie," she said. "Miss Carter, thank you for meeting me." Ruth looked her over. "You, Diane?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then sit. Standing makes things feel like court." Diane sat. Annie sat across from her, Ruth beside Annie with her purse on her lap and both hands folded over it. Diane took a breath. "Before anything else, I want to say I'm sorry, not as a company statement. As the person responsible for this district, I should have seen problems at that store sooner." Ruth tilted her head. "Should have and did not are different things. What happens now?" Diane accepted that without flinching. Annie noticed. "Now I ask Annie what she is comfortable telling me. Nothing she says today will go through Vance. He has no access to her schedule, phone number, payroll, or personnel file. He has been suspended pending investigation." Annie looked down at her hands. The petroleum jelly made them shine under the library light. "Is he still getting paid?" Diane paused. "For the moment, yes. That is standard during suspension." Ruth made a small sound. Diane nodded. "I know." Annie looked up. "He held my check for almost 2 weeks." "I know that now," Diane said. "And that is one of the reasons this investigation is moving fast." Diane opened the folder and turned it so Annie could see. There were copies of time records, printed schedules, meal break logs. Annie's name appeared again and again beside numbers that suddenly looked official, as if her tired feet had finally been translated into language the company understood. "We found manual holds on 2 pay periods," Diane said. "We found meal breaks logged when you were still on camera working. We also found schedule changes made after you declined extra closing shifts." Annie almost corrected her, then stopped. Diane noticed. Was it only about shifts? Ruth did not move, but Annie felt her grandmother's presence beside her like a steady wall. "No," Annie said. Diane waited. Annie rubbed one thumb against the side of her cup of water. "He said things. At first I thought maybe I was being too sensitive." "What kinds of things?" "About my smile, my body, how I should be nicer if I wanted good hours. He'd come into the storage area when I was alone. Stand close. Ask if I had a boyfriend. Tell me he could help me out." Diane's mouth tightened, but she kept her voice even. "Did he touch you?" Annie's answer came after a long second. "Not like that. But he'd brush against me, put his hand on my back when there was room to pass. Once he blocked the shelf and said I could get by if I said please." Ruth's hand moved over Annie's under the table. Diane wrote carefully. "Did you report it?" "To who?" Annie asked. And the question came out sharper than she meant. "He was the manager. He made the schedule. He controlled the hours. He controlled my pay." Diane lowered her pen. "You're right. That was the failure." That answer made Annie look at her. Diane continued. "A reporting system that sends a complaint back through the person causing the harm is not a reporting system. It is a locked door." Ruth nodded once. Now we are speaking English. For the first time that morning, Annie felt something in her chest loosen. Not trust, not yet, but maybe a place where trust could stand later. Diane slid a second paper forward. "Mr. Harrington authorized immediate correction of your wages, including missed meal premiums and overtime adjustment. You received the first deposit last night. The remaining adjustment will process today." Annie looked at the number and felt heat rise behind her eyes again. She blinked it back. Diane saw that too and did not make a speech out of it. He also asked me to discuss your schedule. You are not required to work at the Cleveland store during the investigation unless you choose to. We can transfer you temporarily, place you on paid administrative leave, or adjust shifts under a different supervisor. Annie looked at Ruth. Ruth did not answer for her. I need to work, Annie said. Understood. And I don't want Vance thinking he ran me off. Diane nodded. Then we can place you on day shifts for now, reporting directly to me and the assistant district trainer. No closing shifts until you feel comfortable. Annie let that settle. Day shifts meant safer bus rides, fewer hours alone in the back, a chance to check on Ruth before evening. It sounded like a luxury, and that made her angry for needing it. There's something else, Diane said. Mr. Harrington reviewed the footage from last night. He saw how you handled the food. Annie stiffened. I know how it looked. No, Diane said. You don't. Annie frowned. Diane leaned forward slightly. He said you were more careful with a discarded burger than some managers are with entire stores. Ruth looked at Annie then, and her face softened with pride Annie did not know how to hold. Diane continued. He wants to meet with you. Not for press. Not for a photo. He wants to ask you what that store looks like from where you stand. Annie shook her head. I'm not a manager. No, but you saw things management missed. I saw things because I had to survive them. Sometimes that is the clearest view. Annie looked toward the library window. Outside, a bus pulled up to the curb and hissed open. People climbed aboard with lunch bags, backpacks, canes, tired faces, ordinary people going to jobs that would not make the news unless something went wrong. What does he want from me? Annie asked. Diane answered honestly. I think he wants the truth. I don't know if he's ready for all of it. Ruth gave a dry laugh. Nobody ever is. Annie folded the edge of the paper in front of her, then smoothed it back out. She thought of the staff-only hallway, the grease burns on Luis's wrist, Keisha going quiet whenever Vance came too close, old Mr. Albright eating crackers from his coat pocket during break, because employee meals cost too much. She thought of the dumpster, the burger, the way Vance's hand had pulled at her bag. I'll meet him, she said, but not at that store. Diane nodded. Where? Annie looked around the library. The retirees with newspapers. The librarian helping a woman print a form. Ruth beside her, solid and watchful. Here, Annie said. This table. Diane wrote it down. I'll tell him. And Miss Whitaker? Diana is fina. Annie hesitated. If I talk, I don't want people saying I'm trying to get special treatment. Ruth's fingers tightened around her purse, but she let Annie finish. Diane closed the folder. Annie, special treatment is not being paid for hours you worked. It is not being safe from harassment. It is not being allowed to eat during a long shift. Those are not favors. Those are basics. Annie looked down. Diane added, and if anyone at Harrington has forgotten that, they need to be reminded by someone they cannot ignore. Across town, William Harrington sat in the back office above the restaurant, the Cleveland skyline pale beyond the window. Mark stood beside the desk with a stack of printed reports. You were right, Mark said. It's bigger than Vance. William did not answer at once. He was reading a list of manual payroll edits from 6 stores in the region. Different managers, same patterns, missed breaks, held checks, young workers, low-wage workers, people least likely to complain. Finally, he set the papers down. Arrange the meeting with Annie, he said. At the regional office? No. Mark checked his notes. Diane says Annie requested the public library. William looked at him. Then that's where we go. Mark hesitated. Sir, there may be media interest soon. If word gets out that you're meeting her there, no cameras, no announcement, no statement. What do you want out of the meeting? William looked back at the reports, then toward the floor below, where lunch service was already starting, where workers in uniforms moved fast enough to make the numbers look good. I want to hear what we paid people not to tell us, he said. That afternoon, Annie went home with Ruth, carrying the papers in her backpack beside the folded brown bag from the night before. She did not know yet that the old bag would become something she kept, not because of the food, but because of the line it marked. Before that night, Annie had thought survival meant keeping quiet and getting through the shift. Now she was beginning to understand that silence had been part of the price, and she was tired of paying. The next morning, Annie returned to the library alone. Ruth wanted to come. She stood by the kitchen table with her coat already buttoned, purse tucked under her arm, eyes sharp enough to make any district manager sit up straighter. But Annie shook her head while tying her shoes. "I need to do this one myself." Ruth studied her for a moment. "By yourself doesn't mean by your lonesome. I know. You call me if one of those people starts talking in circles. I will. And don't let anybody make you grateful for what they should have done right the first time." Annie gave a small nod. She had heard Ruth say some version of that all her life, about landlords, bill collectors, nurses at the clinic, school office clerks, men at counters who called her sweetheart while refusing to help. This morning, the words settled differently. They did not make Annie feel brave. They made her remember she did not have to arrive empty-handed. She packed her GED workbook, the papers Diane had given her, 2 pay stubs, a notebook, and the folded brown paper bag from the night behind the restaurant. She almost left the bag on the table. Then she put it in the backpack anyway. She did not know why. Maybe because people with clean desks and good shoes needed evidence that hunger had a shape. The library was quieter than it had been the day before. A few older men sat at the newspaper table, arguing softly about the Browns, as if the season could still be repaired by advice. A woman in a nurse's uniform printed something at the public computer. The librarian gave Annie a gentle greeting and pointed toward the back. William Harrington was already there. That surprised her. People like him, Annie thought. Usually arrived last so everyone could feel them enter. He sat at the same table she had chosen, wearing a dark coat over a plain white shirt. No tie. Mark stood a few steps away near the shelves, holding a folder but not hovering. Diane sat at the table too, with a legal pad closed in front of her. William rose when Annie approached. "Good morning, Annie." "Morning. Thank you for coming." She sat down before he could pull out the chair. She did not want too much kindness too fast. Kindness could make a person drop their guard, and Annie had not survived by doing that. William sat again. "I asked Diane to be here because you already spoke with her. Mark is here to take notes only if you agree. Nothing leaves this table with your name attached unless you approve it." Annie looked at Mark. "No recording?" "No recording," Mark said. "Notes only, and I can step away." Annie thought about it. "He can stay." William nodded. "All right." For a few seconds nobody spoke. Annie could hear the hum of the lights, pages turning somewhere behind her, the wheels of a book cart moving down an aisle. She liked that. A public place had witnesses without making a show of it. William folded his hands on the table. "I owe you an apology." Annie looked at him carefully. "You already said that." "Not properly." She waited. "I saw you behind the restaurant. I saw what Vance did. But what happened to you started before I walked down those stairs. It started in the schedules, in the payroll system, in the rules that made it easier to throw food away than feed the person who cooked it. Those are my systems." Diane looked down at her pad. Mark did not move. Annie's fingers closed around the strap of her backpack. "Did you know?" "No." She held his gaze. "Should you have?" William did not look away. Yes, that answer mattered. Not because it fixed anything. It did not. But it did not duck. Annie had spent too much of her short working life listening to adults duck. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out the folded brown paper bag. She placed it on the table between them. The paper was creased, cleaned as best she could manage, one corner still stained from the alley. Diane's face changed. William looked at the bag for a long moment. Annie said, "That's what I took. No one reached for it. I know it probably looks foolish that I kept it," she continued, "but I wanted to remember what it felt like. Not because of the food, because I worked all day under a sign that said family, service, respect, and at the end of the night I was scared to take something your store had already thrown away." William's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. Annie looked down at the paper bag. "I wasn't trying to steal from you. I was trying to go home with something." "I believe you," William said. She gave a short breath. "You believe me because you saw it. What about the ones you didn't see?" The question seemed to strike him harder than accusation would have. "That's why I'm here," he said. Annie opened her notebook. The first page was not neat. Some lines were written on buses, some during breaks, some late at night while Ruth slept. She had not meant it to become anything important. It had started as a way to keep track of hours, then names, then things people said when they thought no one with power would care. She read from it without looking up much. Meal breaks logged when we didn't take them. Clock-out times changed after closing. People told not to complain because there were plenty of applicants. Girls scheduled alone with Vance after they told him no. Luis losing 2 hours because he asked why his overtime was missing. Keisha moved off register after a customer said she had an attitude, even though the customer called her out of her name first. Mr. Albright paying half price for food at the end of a shift because employees weren't allowed to eat what was going in the trash. Diane wrote quickly now. William asked, Mr. Albright? Older man, works prep and dining room, bad knee, never late, always says good morning even when nobody says it back. William looked toward Mark. Get his records too. Annie raised her eyes. That's not the point. William stopped. The point is you can't keep needing a name before you fix the rule. He took that in. You're right. Annie turned another page. There's a rule that says employees can't take discarded food. Vance used that rule like a threat. But nobody asked why employees working dinner rush can't afford dinner. Mark's pen paused. William leaned forward slightly. What would you change? Annie almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the question was too large for a table in the back of a library. I'm not corporate. I know. I don't have a business degree. I have plenty of people with business degrees. They gave me the reports that missed you. Annie looked at him, trying to decide whether he meant it. He did. She took a slow breath. First, pay people on time. If payroll has a problem, it should alert someone above the store manager, not the person causing the problem. Diane nodded. That can be done. Second, no manager should be able to change hours without the employee getting a text or email. Mark wrote that down. Third, if someone works more than 6 hours, they get a real meal, not a discount, not whatever's left. If a manager feels generous, a meal. William said, agreed. Annie kept going before fear could catch up. Fourth, food that's still wrapped and safe shouldn't go straight into the dumpster. Put it in a staff fridge first. Label it. Time it. If employees don't take it, send it to a church or shelter at closing. Diane said, there are food safety rules. I know, Annie said. So make rules for saving it safely instead of throwing it away easily. For the first time, William almost smiled. Not with amusement. With recognition. What else? He asked. Annie looked at the notebook again. This was the hard part. If a manager makes somebody uncomfortable, the complaint can't go to the same manager. It has to go outside the store, and the employee shouldn't lose hours after speaking up. Diane's face grew serious. You're right. And don't just train managers with some video they click through while eating lunch. Make them sit in a room and hear what it feels like when your paycheck disappears. William looked at the folded bag on the table. That may be the most important training we've ever had. Annie closed the notebook. Her hands were shaking, so she put them in her lap. William said, would you be willing to help us build this? She went still. Help how? Meet with Diane. Review the first draft. Tell us what we're missing. Paid time, of course. Annie looked at him quickly. Paid? Yes. I don't want charity. Neither do I, Diane added. Consulting hours. Temporary. Separate from your store schedule. Annie looked from Diane to William. People are going to say I'm getting special treatment. William answered before Diane could. People say that when fairness reaches someone they thought should stay quiet. Annie did not know what to do with that, so she looked down at the table. At the front of the library, someone laughed softly over the newspaper. A printer beeped. The ordinary morning went on. And that steadied her. I'll help, Annie said. But I'm not letting you turn me into some poster. William nodded. No posters. No pictures. No pictures. And don't call it Annie's policy. What should we call it? She thought of the paper bag, the meal break she never got, the workers who smiled through hunger because rent did not wait for dignity to heal. Fair plate, she said. Because it's not just about food. It's about what people earned. William repeated it once. Fair plate. Diane wrote it at the top of a clean page. For the first time since the alley, Annie felt something other than shame when she saw the brown bag on the table. It was still stained. Still wrinkled. Still proof of a hard night. But now it had become something else too, a beginning. By the end of that week, the name Fairplate had moved from Annie's notebook to a draft policy on Diane Whitaker's desk. It still looked strange to Annie in corporate font, with section numbers and approval lines, as if the words had put on a suit. But under all that formatting were the things she had said at the library. Pay people on time. Feed employees during long shifts. Protect workers who report harassment. Stop treating safe food like waste before people have eaten. Diane called Annie twice to ask questions that sounded simple until Annie answered them from the floor. If the staff fridge is in the break room, will people use it? Not if managers can see who takes food, Annie said. Some folks would rather stay hungry than be watched needing help. Diane was quiet for a second. Then where? Same room, but no sign-out sheet. Label the food, not the person. Another time Diane asked whether employees would trust a hotline. Not if it sounds like corporate, Annie said. What should it sound like? Like somebody's actually on the other end. Diane did not laugh. She wrote it down. Annie still worked day shifts under a temporary supervisor named Carla, a woman in her 50s who wore reading glasses on a chain and called everyone by their full names when she meant business. Carla did not hover over Annie, which Annie appreciated. She simply said, "You do your job, I'll do mine. And if anybody bothers you, they come through me first." The store felt different without Vance, but not safe yet. His office door was closed. His name had been removed from the weekly schedule, but his habits remained in the walls. Employees still checked their hours twice. Keisha still avoided the storage room if she could. Louise still looked toward the back office before speaking too freely. People had learned fear in small daily lessons, and no one forgot a course like that overnight. Customers knew something had happened. Some came in with curious eyes, trying to match Annie to whatever rumor they had heard. A few were kind, in a way that made her uncomfortable. One older woman touched Annie's hand while paying for a biscuit and said, "Bless your heart, honey," as if Annie had survived a storm for public encouragement. Annie smiled because she had been raised to respect elders, but the touch stayed with her after the woman left. At home, Ruth noticed. "You're carrying strangers again," she said that night while cutting coupons at the kitchen table. Annie opened her GED workbook but did not read. "What does that mean?" "It means folks put their feelings on you, and you walk around trying not to drop them. I don't want to be rude. Good manners don't require you to become furniture." Annie looked up. Ruth clipped a coupon for soup and placed it in a small envelope. "You can say thank you and still keep your spirit to yourself." Annie thought about that the next morning when a man at the counter recognized her and said, "You're that girl from the trash video, right?" The line behind him shifted. Luis, working fries, glanced over. Annie kept her voice steady. "Your total is $7.42, sir. I saw it online. People are saying all kinds of stuff. Sauce in the bag?" He seemed surprised she did not engage. Yeah, ranch." She added the packet, handed him the receipt, and called the next order. Her hands shook only after he walked away. At noon, Diane arrived with William and Mark. They did not enter through the front with cameras or greetings for customers. They came through the side door, wearing visitor badges. William paused near the dining area and watched the crew work lunch rush. This time Annie saw him before he saw her. He did not look like he had in the alley. In daylight, he looked less like authority and more like a man trying to understand a language he should have learned years ago. Carla pointed him toward a corner table after the rush slowed. Annie wiped her hands and joined them with a cup of water. She had only 15 minutes before she was due back. William noticed. "We can wait until your break is longer." Annie sat. "Breaks are only longer on paper," Diane grimaced. "That's exactly what we're trying to fix." Mark opened a folder. "We finished the first regional review. Cleveland wasn't the only store with manual payroll holds." Annie was not surprised, and that made her sad. "How many?" she asked. "Enough," William said. "Too many." Diane slid a page toward her. "We are not asking you to review legal language. We want to know if this would work in a real store." Annie read the section on staff meals. "This says employees can receive one approved meal after 6 hours, manager discretion." She pushed the paper back. Diane frowned. "What's wrong?" "Manager discretion is how people like Vance eat first and people like Luis wait until the food gets cold." William looked at Mark. Remove that phrase. Mark made a note. Annie continued. Make it automatic. 6 hours means meal. No begging. No favor. Diane nodded. Automatic. And don't make people order only the cheapest thing. If a person spends all day serving chicken, they shouldn't be told they only qualify for plain fries. William's mouth pressed into a line. Agreed. Mark wrote faster. A shadow fell across the table. Annie looked up and felt her stomach tighten. Vance stood near the edge of the dining area in a dark jacket and jeans, no uniform, no badge. His face had a hard, rested look, as if he had spent the last few days feeding his anger. Carla moved from behind the counter as soon as she saw him. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Vance lifted both hands. I'm a customer. William stood. No, you're not. The few customers nearby turned their heads. Annie stayed seated, but every part of her wanted to leave. Vance looked past William to her. Enjoying your little meeting? Annie said nothing. Carla stepped between them. Out. Vance smiled at her. You always were good at following orders. William's voice stayed controlled. Mark, call building security. Vance gave a short laugh. Security, that's rich. When I tried to enforce policy, I got suspended. She digs in a dumpster and gets a seat at the table. Annie felt the words hit the room. Not just her. Louise heard them. Keisha heard them. Mr. Albright, wiping trays near the soda station, looked up. William said, You were told not to contact employees or come onto store property during the investigation. I came for lunch. You came to intimidate her. Vance's eyes flicked toward Annie again. She doesn't look intimidated. Looks pretty comfortable to me. Annie stood then. Her knees felt weak, but she did not want to be spoken about while sitting down. Ruth's voice came back to her. Good manners don't require you to become furniture. I'm not comfortable, she said. Vance smiled like he had been waiting for her voice. There she is. I'm tired, Annie said. There's a difference. The room tightened around the exchange. William started to speak, but Annie raised one hand slightly, not to silence him, just to hold the space long enough to finish. I'm tired of you saying I took food like I stole something from your mouth. I'm tired of you acting like my paycheck was a gift. I'm tired of being polite so men like you don't get angry. Vance's expression changed. The smile thinned. Annie's voice shook, but it carried. You told me to eat from the trash because I wouldn't let you treat me like I owed you more than work. That's the truth. Louise stepped out from the fry station. I heard him say stuff to her. Keisha followed, arms folded tight. Me too. Mr. Albright set down the tray he was wiping. And I saw him change hours. More than once. Vance looked around, suddenly aware that the people he had counted on being afraid were no longer looking down. This is ridiculous, he said. No, Carla said. This is overdue. Mark returned with 2 security staff from the shopping center. Vance backed up a step, anger burning through his face. William looked at him. Leave now. Anything else you have to say can go through counsel. Vance pointed toward Annie, but his hand dropped when one of the security guards moved closer. You don't know what you started, he said to her. Annie felt the old fear rise, but this time it meant something else. Not courage exactly. Company. She looked at Louise, Keisha, Mr. Albright, Carla, Diane, even William. For the first time in that restaurant, Vance was the one standing alone. Yes, Annie said quietly. I do. Vance left through the front doors with security beside him. The bell above the entrance gave a small, ordinary chime, and then he was outside. No one clapped. No one made a speech. The fryers kept humming. A timer beeped behind the counter. A customer at the register cleared his throat and asked if anyone was taking orders. Carla wiped her hands on a towel. Louise, fries. Keisha, register. Mr. Albright, dining room. Annie, take 5. Annie almost laughed at the plainness of it. Life did not pause long for justice. Lunch still had to be served. William gathered the policy pages, but his eyes stayed on the workers returning to their stations. Annie sat back down. Diane leaned toward her. Are you okay? No, Annie said, then took a breath. But I'm still here. William nodded, as if that answer deserved more respect than any polished one. That evening, long after Annie went home, the security report reached Harrington headquarters. By then, 3 more employees from the Cleveland store had asked to give statements. 2 from other locations had called the hotline Diane set up temporarily. Mark delivered the updates to William just after 8. "It's spreading," Mark said. William looked at the list of names. "No," he said, "it's surfacing." By Monday morning, the story was no longer staying inside the Cleveland store. It had traveled the way ugly things travel now, not with a knock at the door, but through phones held too close to tired faces before breakfast. Someone had posted the security clip. Not the whole clip, not Vance blocking Annie in the alley, not his hand on her backpack, not the way he had kicked the dumpster and laughed. Only the few seconds where Annie crouched near the trash, pulled out the paper bag, cleaned it with her sleeve, and tucked it into her backpack. The caption read, "Fast food worker caught stealing from dumpster, then gets special treatment from billionaire owner." Annie saw it on the bus. She was standing because the seats were full, one hand gripping the pole, the other holding her phone low near her coat. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. The video was grainy, gray, taken from above and behind. But the thin jacket, the backpack, the way she moved with care, all of it was hers. Her stomach dropped so hard she had to tighten her knees to keep standing. A man seated nearby glanced at her screen, then up at her face. Recognition came slowly, then too fast. Annie locked her phone and looked toward the front of the bus. At the next stop, 3 people got on, cold air pushing in with them. A woman in scrubs bumped Annie's shoulder by accident and said, "Sorry, baby," in a tired voice. Annie almost cried from that one normal word. By the time she reached the restaurant, the video had thousands of views. Carla met her at the side door. "You don't have to work the counter today. I'm scheduled." "I know. I can put you in prep." Annie heard the kindness in it and hated that she needed it. Prep is fine. Inside, the store felt like a place pretending nothing had happened. Fryers popped, timers beeped, headsets crackled, customers ordered chicken biscuits and coffee. But people looked at Annie too quickly, then away. Luis gave her a small nod from the fry station. Keisha came by with a sleeve of cups and whispered, "Don't read the comments." That meant there were comments worth not reading. During her first break, Annie read them anyway in the employee restroom with the fan rattling above her. Some were angry for her. Some said Harrington should be ashamed. Some said no worker should be hungry after a shift. But others dug under her skin with dirty fingernails. She knew what she was doing. Always somebody trying to get paid. Why didn't she just buy food like everyone else? People like that always play victim. One comment said, "She looks like she belongs back there." Annie turned off the phone and set it on the sink. She gripped the edge of the basin. The restroom mirror showed her face under harsh light. Her eyes too bright. Her uniform collar sitting crooked. She fixed the collar because it gave her something to do with her hands. A knock came. "Annie?" Keisha's voice. "You okay?" Annie opened the door. "I'm fine." Keisha did not believe her but respected the lie. "Diane's here." Diane was in the dining area with William and Mark. No cameras. But 2 local reporters stood outside near the sidewalk, trying to film through the windows. Customers kept turning in their seats. William saw Annie come out and his face tightened. "Did you see it?" "Yes. We're working to get the full footage released." Annie's chest went cold. "Full footage?" "Only if you agree," Diane said quickly. "It would show what Vance did before and after. So everybody can watch me get humiliated from a better angle?" William took that in. "No. You're right. I'm sorry." Annie looked toward the windows. One reporter lifted a phone. She stepped back behind a menu board. "I don't want my life online," she said. Mark said, "We can issue a statement without naming you. They already know my face." No one had a good answer. Carla came from behind the counter, wiping her hands on a towel. "Then we don't feed the circus. We feed customers. And we take care of our people." William looked at her. "What do you need?" Carla did not hesitate. "Close the lobby for 1 hour. Drive through only. Give the staff room to breathe." Mark began to object, then stopped when William looked at him. "Do it," William said. 15 minutes later, the dining room was cleared. A sign on the door said temporary lobby closure. The reporters stayed outside. annoyed. The drive-through kept moving. Inside, the crew gathered near the back under the hum of the soda machine. Some leaned against counters. Mr. Albright sat carefully on a chair Carla brought for him. Annie stood near the prep table, arms folded, wishing she could be anywhere else and knowing leaving would feel like surrender. William stood in front of them, not on a stage, not behind a podium. Just a man in a coat standing on the same floor where they had dropped fries, wiped spills, and checked schedules with nervous hands. "I'm not going to ask any of you to speak," he said, "but I need to say something plainly. The video online does not show the truth. It shows a few seconds taken from a night this company should be ashamed of." No one moved. He continued. An employee worked a long shift. Her pay had been held. A meal break was recorded that she did not receive. She was mocked by the manager responsible for her schedule and wages. That is the truth as we know it today. Annie looked at the floor. Hearing it said aloud helped and hurt at the same time. William's voice lowered. "If anyone here has had hours changed, pay delayed, breaks recorded that you did not take, or if any manager made work feel unsafe, Diane will take statements. You may bring someone with you. You may speak off-site. You will be paid for that time. And no one will lose hours for telling the truth." A young cook Annie barely knew raised his hand halfway, then dropped it. Carla saw him. "Malcolm?" He cleared his throat. "If we already quit, does it matter?" William turned to him. "Yes. My sister worked here last year. Vance cut her hours after she complained about him texting her. Diane wrote his name. Can she speak with us?" "I'll ask." Keisha spoke next, not loudly. "He told me I looked better on register when I smiled. Then, he moved me to storage when I stopped smiling." Luis leaned on the fry station. "He changed my clock. Out twice. I thought maybe I forgot." "You didn't forget," Mr. Albright said. Everyone looked at him. The older man rested both hands on his cane. "He did it to me too. I kept my own notebook." Annie lifted her head. Mr. Albright gave her a small look. Not pity, not rescue. Just recognition. Old factory habit. Bosses get creative with numbers when they think you can't count. A few people let out tired laughs. The kind that carried anger. Diane asked, "Would you be willing to share that notebook?" Mr. Albright nodded. Been waiting for somebody worth showing. The meeting did not become dramatic. It became worse than that. It became specific. Dates. Hours. Texts. Missed breaks. Comments in storage. Threats hidden inside. Schedule changes. One by one, small stories became a pattern no one could call a misunderstanding. Annie listened, and with each person who spoke, a little of the shame moved off her shoulders, not because their pain made hers smaller, but because it proved what she had started to believe at the library. She had not been weak. She had been isolated. Near the end, William turned to her. "Annie, you don't have to say anything." She almost didn't. Then she thought of the video, the comments, the people outside wanting her face but not her truth. She thought of the brown paper bag folded at home and Ruth's voice telling her not to let other people carry her name wrong. "I didn't take that burger because I wanted something free," she said. Her voice was unsteady, but nobody interrupted. "I took it because I worked all day and left with nothing. I took it because I was hungry and because my check was being held by a man who knew exactly what that would do to me." She looked at the crew, not William. "And I kept being quiet because I thought quiet would protect me. It didn't." Keisha wiped her cheek fast. Luis looked down. Annie took one breath. "So I'm not being quiet anymore." Carla nodded once, firm and proud. Outside, one of the reporters knocked on the glass. No one turned. By late afternoon, Diane had scheduled 11 interviews. Mark had arranged secure access for employees from other stores to report payroll issues. William had ordered a legal hold on all footage, time records, manager messages, and schedule edits for the region. At 6, Annie's shift ended. For once, nobody asked her to stay late. Carla handed her a sealed staff meal bag. Annie looked at it. "I didn't pay for this." "Fair plate trial," Carla said. "Started 5 minutes ago." Inside was a chicken sandwich, still warm, an apple cup, and a bottle of water. Annie held it with both hands. Carla said, "Take it home before I start crying and embarrass us both." Annie gave a small laugh. It was tired, but it was real. When she stepped outside, the reporters were gone. The evening was cold, the sidewalk salted white, the bus stop lit at the corner. She carried the meal bag openly this time, not hidden in her backpack, not rescued from the trash, not wrapped in shame. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ruth. "You coming home, baby?" Annie typed back, "Yes, and I'm bringing dinner." At headquarters that night, William watched the full security footage again. Not because he needed proof, because he needed to stop looking away before the worst moment. He watched Vance laugh, watched Annie protect the bag, watched himself enter too late. Mark stood nearby. "The board will ask how far this goes." William closed the laptop. "Tell them the truth," he said. "As far as it has to." By the next morning, Harrington headquarters had 3 versions of the same problem on 3 different floors. Legal wanted caution. Public relations wanted a statement. Operations wanted time. William Harrington wanted names, dates, records, and the truth before anyone polished it into something comfortable. He stood at the head of a conference table in the Cleveland regional office, with the full security footage paused on the screen behind him. Not the edited clip. The whole thing. Annie crouching in the cold, Vance stepping out, the kick against the dumpster, his hand on her backpack, her pulling away, William arriving too late to prevent the humiliation, but soon enough to see it. No one in the room was eager to look at the screen. Diane sat to William's right with a stack of employee statements. Mark stood near the wall, phone in hand, fielding messages from headquarters. Across the table were 3 senior managers from the region, 2 HR representatives, a labor attorney, and a communications director named Paulson who had flown in before sunrise with a garment bag and a face full of damage control. Paulson tapped his pen against a folder. "We need to separate the employee's personal hardship from the broader company position." William looked at him. "Say that again, but like a human being." Paulson stopped tapping. "I mean, we should avoid making this look like an admission of systemic failure." Diane gave a short breath through her nose. William turned to her. "How many statements so far?" 26 from this district, 11 from the Cleveland store, 6 from former employees, 9 from other locations after the temporary hotline opened. The labor attorney shifted in her chair. "Some are still unverified." "Then verify them," William said. Paulson leaned forward. "William, the board is nervous. The clip is spreading. If we let the story become wage theft, harassment, racial bias, food waste, and executive negligence all at once, we lose control of the narrative." William looked at the frozen image on the screen. Annie's hands were around the backpack. Vance's face was turned in that ugly half-smile. "The narrative," William said, "is that an employee worked all day and left hungry because a manager held her pay. The narrative is already out of our control because we failed to control the conduct." No one answered. Mark's phone buzzed. He read the message and looked up. "The board wants a call at noon. They'll get one. They're asking whether we intend to release a statement denying liability." William's answer came quickly. "No." Paulson sat back. "That would be unwise. So was ignoring the people who made our stores run." Diane opened one of the folders. "There's more. Mr. Albright's notebook matches several time edits in the system. Luis's overtime complaint matches 2 manager overrides. Keisha's statement about being moved off register lines up with schedule changes after a customer incident." "Customer incident?" William asked. Diane glanced at the paper. "A customer used a racial slur. Keisha refused to serve him. Vance wrote her up for attitude and reassigned her to back prep for 3 weeks." William closed his eyes for 1 second. "And our system accepted that?" "Our system recorded it," Diane said. "Nobody reviewed the reason." The words sat heavy because they were not dramatic. They were worse. They were ordinary. At the Cleveland store, Annie worked prep with Carla nearby. The lobby had reopened, but the mood had changed. Not peaceful. Alert. People spoke in lower voices. Some customers smiled too hard at her. Others avoided her line of sight. A man in a work jacket asked if she was the one from the video, and before Annie could answer, Carla stepped in. "She's working, sir. What can I get you?" The man raised his hands. "I didn't mean nothing." Carla's face did not change. "Then order something." Luis laughed under his breath by the fry station. Annie kept packing sandwiches, but she felt grateful enough that it hurt. During the slow hour after lunch, Mr. Albright came in on his day off. He wore a brown coat and carried a spiral notebook in a plastic grocery bag, as if rain might come through the roof. He asked for Diane. Carla sent him to the side booth where Diane had set up interviews. Annie watched him lower himself into the seat with care. His knee always troubled him after noon. He placed the notebook on the table. "I don't want anybody thinking I kept this to sue," he said. Diane answered, "Why did you keep it?" Mr. Albright looked toward the kitchen, where Annie was wiping a prep counter. "Because I worked 34 years in a tire plant before this. I know when numbers start walking away from working people." Diane opened the notebook. Inside were dates, shifts, clock-in times, clock-out times, notes about missed breaks, notes about employees borrowing bus fare, notes about food thrown out after close. His handwriting was small and steady. Diane looked up. "You wrote all this down?" "Somebody had to." Annie turned away before he could see her face. For days she had thought she was the only one keeping proof because she was afraid no one would believe her. Now she learned fear had made bookkeepers out of half the store. That evening, William took the board call from the same regional office. 11 faces appeared on the screen, all framed by better lighting than the room deserved. Some were old friends, some were investors, some were people who had praised him for building Harrington Chicken and Grill into a household name. Now they wore the expression people wear when compassion threatens revenue. The board chair, Margaret Vale, spoke first. "William, we are not indifferent to what happened, but we need discipline. You cannot restructure company policy based on one unfortunate incident." William had expected that phrase, one unfortunate incident. It made cruelty sound like weather. "It isn't one incident," he said. He listed the numbers: 26 statements, payroll holds, missed breaks, food disposal rules, schedule retaliation, a manager under investigation for harassment and wage manipulation, similar patterns in other stores. A board member named Clayton said, "Patterns are not proof." William nodded. "Then we'll gather proof. But while we do, I'm implementing emergency protections in the Cleveland district." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Define protections. No manual payroll holds without district approval. Employee notification for any time edit. Paid interviews for staff participating in the investigation. Temporary independent hotline. Staff meals for shifts over 6 hours. Safe packaged food sorted before disposal." Clayton leaned back. "That has cost implications. So does turnover. So do lawsuits. So does public disgust." Paulson, sitting off camera, rubbed his forehead. Margaret said, "You sound emotional." William looked at her through the screen. "I watched one of our employees protect a burger from a dumpster because she had worked all day and still had no dinner. If that doesn't produce emotion, we should all resign." The call went quiet in the way video calls do when no one wants to be first to breathe into the microphone. Clayton finally said, "You are opening the door to every complaint in the company." William answered, "Good. A door is better than a dumpster." At Annie's apartment, Ruth listened to the 6 o'clock local news while peeling an orange with a small knife. Annie sat at the table, trying to study for her GED math section, but numbers swam in front of her. The anchor mentioned Harrington Chicken and Grill and a leaked video. Annie reached for the remote, but Ruth gently moved it away. "Let it play. I don't want to hear it. You need to know what they're saying." The report showed the restaurant from outside. Then a short clip of William speaking near the regional office. He did not mention Annie's name. He did not describe her home, her grandmother, or her private pain. He said an investigation was ongoing. He said no employee should have wages delayed as retaliation. He said food safety would not be used as an excuse for waste or humiliation. Then a reporter asked, "Mr. Harrington, are you saying this was about race?" William paused. Annie leaned toward the television despite herself. "I'm saying power often chooses the people it thinks won't be believed," he said. "In this case, a young black employee was mocked, unpaid, and shamed for hunger. I won't pretend those facts don't matter." Ruth set the orange peel down. "Well, he said it." Annie looked at her workbook. "People are going to be mad. People were already mad. The question is whether they're mad at the truth or mad at being caught." Annie's phone buzzed. A message from Keisha. "You see the news?" Another from Luis. "Vance is losing it online." Annie did not open social media. She had learned enough. Across town, Vance sat in his truck outside a closed gas station, watching the same clip on his phone. His jaw worked as William spoke. The comments under the news report had turned against him. Former employees were naming him. Someone had posted that the company was asking for statements. He typed one message, deleted it, typed another. She's lying. He deleted that too. Then he opened an old folder on his phone and found the edited clip of Annie by the dumpster. He had thought it would shame her into silence. Instead, it had pulled the floor out from under him. His thumb hovered over a contact named Ray, another manager from the region. Vance typed, "We need to talk before they make this bigger." At the regional office, Mark brought William a fresh report just after 9. Two managers exchanged messages with Vance after his suspension. One of them forwarded him internal schedule screenshots. William looked up. Who? Ray Collins from the Parma location, possibly another from Akron. Diane, still at the table with witness notes, looked exhausted but focused. If they're coordinating stories, we need it to preserve all communications now. Do it, William said. Mark nodded. There's one more thing. Vance accessed the security system remotely before the clip leaked. William's face hardened, so he leaked it. Looks that way. William looked toward the dark window. Beyond it, Cleveland spread out in winter lights. Thousands of people heading home from shifts that paid by the hour. Shifts where one missing check could change a week. He thought of Annie putting the burger in her backpack with care. He thought of Mr. Albright's notebook. He thought of Keisha moved away from customers because she would not accept insult as service. Tomorrow, William said, I want every regional manager in this office. Diane closed her folder. For a briefing? For a reckoning. That night, Annie sat at the kitchen table after Ruth went to bed. The folded paper bag was still beside her workbook. She touched the edge of it once, then opened her notebook and wrote 2 words at the top of a clean page. Fair plate. Below it, she added what Ruth had said while watching the news. Truth makes noise before it makes change. Annie looked at the sentence for a long time. Then she closed the notebook, not because she was done, but because tomorrow would need her rested. For the first time in days, she believed tomorrow might need her for more than surviving. The next morning, William arrived at the Cleveland regional office before the sun had burned through the low winter clouds. He carried no coffee, no prepared remarks, no polished folder from communications. Under one arm was a stack of printed reports marked with colored tabs. Under the other was Mr. Albright's spiral notebook in a clear protective sleeve. Mark had suggested scanning it and returning the original. William said no. Some documents should be felt before they were filed. By 8:30, the regional managers began arriving. They came from Parma, Akron, Toledo, Youngstown, Canton, and Columbus. Most wore company jackets over dress shirts. A few greeted one another too loudly, the way people do when they are trying to make a room feel normal. Diane stood near the entrance, checking names against a list. Mark sat at the side table with IT and legal. No one called it a hearing. William had refused that word. Hearings made people perform. He wanted them to answer. Ray Collins from Parma came in last. He was a broad man with a red face and the forced confidence of someone who had already decided he was being unfairly treated. He glanced at Diane, then at William, then chose a chair halfway down the table. William waited until the door closed. You all know why you're here, he said. Ray leaned back. We know there's been a lot of noise online. William looked at him. No. Noise is what happens when a fryer timer goes off. This is evidence. He placed the first report on the table. Payroll edits, missed meal breaks, manual holds, employee complaints. Then he placed Mr. Albright's notebook beside it. The old spiral pad looked out of place on the conference table, and that was exactly why William had brought it. This notebook was kept by a dining room employee with a bad knee who trusted paper more than he trusted us, William said. That should embarrass every person in this room, starting with me. No one spoke. He turned to Diane. Begin. Diane did not raise her voice. She did not need theater. She read dates, stores, patterns. Cleveland had the worst record, but not the only one. Parma showed unexplained clock-out edits after closing. Akron had repeated missed break corrections entered by management without employee confirmation. Toledo had 3 complaints marked resolved without ever contacting the employee who filed them. Columbus had food disposal logs showing sealed meals destroyed while employees on long shifts purchased discounted food or skipped meals. A manager from Canton shifted in his seat. With respect, most of this is compliance cleanup. Stores get busy. People forget breaks. Diane looked at him. People forget once. Systems repeat. William slid a page toward him. Your store logged 112 meal breaks last quarter during active register transactions. You want to explain how employees ate lunch while taking orders? The man looked down. Ray Collins crossed his arms. I'm not defending Vance, but we need to be careful before we turn every manager into a criminal. Hourly employees complain. That's the business. Annie's name had not been spoken yet, but it entered the room with that sentence. William's gaze moved to Ray. Hourly employees work. That's the business. Ray gave a thin smile. You know what I mean. Yes, William said. I'm afraid I do. Mark passed a folder to William. William opened it and read from a printed message. We need to talk before they make this bigger. Ray's face changed. William looked up. You received that from Vance Miller 2 nights ago. Ray said nothing. You also forwarded him internal schedule screenshots after he was suspended and instructed not to contact staff or access company systems. I didn't know he was barred from that. Diane answered. The notice went to every manager in the district. Ray looked annoyed now. He asked what was being said. The man was worried about his job. William leaned on the table with one hand. He leaked edited security footage of an employee to shame her publicly. Ray's mouth closed. He did that after humiliating her, after holding her pay, after trying to take food from her hands in an alley, and you helped him learn who was speaking. That's not fair. No, William said. It isn't. But not to you. At the Cleveland store, Annie was not in the meeting. She had asked not to be. Diane had offered to arrange it by phone. But Annie said she did not want to sit in another room of adults discussing whether what happened to her was bad enough to matter. Instead, she worked prep, slicing tomatoes and restocking lettuce under Carla's calm watch. Keisha came in early, even though her shift did not start for an hour. She sat in the break area with a cup of coffee from home. You okay? Annie asked. Keisha shrugged. I keep thinking about giving a statement. Then I keep thinking about my rent. Annie set down the tomato knife. Diane said paid time. It's not just time. It's being known. Once people know you spoke, they look at you different. Annie understood that too well. They already looked at us different. They just had better manners about hiding it. Keisha looked at her, then gave a tired smile. You sound like your grandma. Everybody keeps saying that. Good. She sounds expensive. Annie laughed, and for a few seconds the prep room felt almost ordinary. Then Luis came through the side door with his phone in his hand. They suspended Ray from Parma. Carla looked up from the schedule. Where'd you hear that? My cousin works there. He said district came in and took his keys. Annie went still. The thing was spreading, but not like gossip now. Like a floor being lifted board by board. Back at the regional office, Ray had been asked to leave his badge and company phone on the table. He did it with shaking anger, not shame. 2 other managers were placed on administrative leave pending review. A 4th admitted he had copied Vance's cost discipline methods because the district praised Cleveland's numbers. That confession changed the air. William asked him, who praised those numbers? The manager looked miserable. Operations reports. Quarterly calls. Vance was always held up as efficient. William looked toward Mark. Mark said quietly, the reports came through my office. William nodded. And mine. Diane closed her folder. This is why Fairplate cannot be a pilot in one store only. The payroll controls need to go district-wide immediately. Legal began to object. Immediate implementation without full policy review creates exposure. William turned to her. Exposure to what? Claims that the company knew of broader violations. We do know. The attorney stopped. William stood straight. From this hour forward, every manual payroll edit in this district requires employee notification and district approval. Every shift over 6 hours includes a meal. Every store must sort sealed safe food before disposal under Diane's temporary protocol. Every complaint bypasses the store manager. Anyone retaliating against an employee for speaking will be terminated. A manager from Youngstown asked, What about cost? William picked up Mr. Albright's notebook. This is cost. We just weren't counting it. At lunch, Annie took her break in the back with Keisha, Luis, and Mr. Albright. Carla had put staff meal bags in the fridge, each labeled with the time and contents. No names, no questions. Annie chose one with a chicken wrap and apple slices. She still felt strange taking it. Not guilty, exactly, but aware of the old fear in her hand. Mr. Albright watched her hesitate. Eat the food, Annie. She looked at him. You've been bossing people long, since 1978. Luis opened his bag. This is weird. Keisha nodded. Good, weird. Carla came in with a clipboard. Everybody gets 20 minutes. Real 20. Not pretend 20. I don't want to catch anybody clocking back in early to impress me. Mr. Albright raised his apple juice. Now that's management. Annie took a bite of the wrap. It was nothing fancy, just warm chicken, lettuce, sauce, soft bread, but she ate sitting down, on paid time, with no one making her ask. The difference nearly made her lose the first bite. Luis noticed and looked away on purpose. That small mercy felt like friendship. In the afternoon, Diane called the store. Carla answered, listened, then handed the phone to Annie. It's for you. Annie stepped toward the hallway. Hello? Annie, it's Diane. I wanted you to hear this before rumors get there first. 3 managers were suspended today, including Ray Collins. We also confirmed Vance accessed the security system before the edited video leaked. Annie leaned against the wall. So it was him. Yes, I knew it was. I'm sorry. Annie closed her eyes. What happens now? We continue. William is taking Fair Plate to the full executive committee tomorrow. Will they say no? They'll try to make it smaller. Annie opened her eyes. Diane added, he asked if you would allow one part of your notebook to be read without your name attached. The part about employees being watched when they take food. Annie thought about the staff fridge. About how she had told Diane to label the food, not the person. She thought about everyone who would rather act full than be seen hungry. Okay, she said. But not the part about my grandmother. Not that part. And not the bag. No. After she hung up, Annie stood there for a moment with the phone still in her hand. A week ago, men like Vance controlled the clock, the schedule, the paycheck, the story. Now pieces of that control were being taken back, not all at once, not cleanly, but enough to hear the crack. When her shift ended, Carla handed her printed hours before Annie could ask. Review them, Carla said. Tell me if they're wrong. Annie looked at the paper. You want me to check them now? I want you to always check them. Annie folded the sheet carefully and put it in her backpack. At the regional office, William stayed long after the managers left. The conference table was covered with notes, flagged reports, coffee cups gone cold, and the old notebook that had made more sense than 3/4 of the company's dashboards. Mark stood by the door, tired enough to forget his usual polish. The executive committee will push back hard, he said. I know. They'll say this should wait until the investigation closes. They can say it. And if they vote against immediate rollout, William looked at the paused security image still on the screen. Annie was not visible in that frame. Only the dumpster, the back door, the patch of wet pavement where she had stood. Then I'll ask them which part they want to defend, he said. The unpaid wages, the missed meals, or the dumpster. The executive committee met the next morning at 9, but William had been awake since 4. He had sat at the small desk in his hotel room with the city still dark beyond the window, reading Annie's notes again. Not all of them, only the parts she had agreed to share. Label the food, not the person. No one should have to sign their name to being hungry. A manager should not be the locked door between a worker and help. These were not slogans. They were instructions from someone who had paid for them with shame she never owed. At 8:55, Mark found him outside the conference room with a folder in one hand and Mr. Albright's notebook under the other. You ready? Mark asked. No. Mark looked at him. William adjusted the notebook under his arm. But ready is not the point. Inside, the committee had arranged itself around the long table. Margaret Vale joined by video from New York. Clayton Pierce sat near the center, arms folded, A silver pen lined up beside his legal pad. Operations, legal, finance, communications, HR, and risk management filled the other seats. Diane sat at the far end with a stack of reports and a face that said she had not come to soften anything. Clayton opened before William sat down. We all agree the Cleveland situation is unacceptable. The question is scope. William took his place. The scope is whatever the evidence shows. The evidence is still developing. Yes. So a nationwide policy shift is premature. William looked toward Diane. District-wide emergency controls began yesterday. Results? Diane opened her folder. 31 payroll corrections identified in 12 hours. 7 missed meal patterns flagged. 4 new harassment complaints submitted through the temporary hotline. 5 stores reported safe packaged food available after closing that would normally have been discarded. Finance leaned forward. How much food? Initial estimate from one night, one district. A little over 900 meals or meal components. No one seemed eager to repeat that number. Margaret's voice came through the screen. The issue is not whether we should improve. The issue is doing it without creating operational chaos. Diane answered before William could. With respect, the chaos was already there. It was just being carried by hourly workers. Clayton tapped his pen once. That is a compelling phrase. But it is not an implementation plan. William placed Annie's excerpt on the table. 1 page. No name. This is the implementation plan's foundation. Clayton glanced at it. A worker's handwritten observations? A worker who understood our store better than the dashboard did. Legal's representative, Ellen Brooks, cleared her throat. We need to consider liability around food redistribution. If staff meals are mishandled, if donation partners fail temperature control, if someone claims illness. William turned to her. Write safety controls. We need time. You have lawyers in 3 time zones. Use them. Ellen's face stayed calm. Pressure does not make policy safer. No, William said. But delay has already made people hungry. Mark passed copies around. The document was titled, Fair Plate Temporary Standards. Automatic meal for shifts over 6 hours. Employee notification for any time edit. District approval for manual payroll holds. Independent complaint channel. No retaliation. Safe packaged food labeled by time and temperature. Offered first as staff meals. Then sent to approved community partners. No sign-out list for employees taking food. No manager discretion. Clayton stopped at that line. No manager discretion? You're removing authority from store leaders. I'm removing one tool they use to punish people. That assumes bad faith. William looked at him. It assumes hunger should not depend on whether a manager likes you. The room held that for a moment. At the Cleveland store, Annie was wiping the prep counter when Carla came in with a radio clip to her belt and a look Annie had learned to read. What happened? Annie asked. Nothing yet. Meeting still going. How do you know? Diane texted me one word. What word? Messy. Annie almost smiled. That sounds right. Keisha came around the corner carrying a box of cup lids. If they cancel staff meals, I'm biting somebody. Carla gave her a look. You will do no such thing on my shift. I'll wait until I'm clocked out. Luis, passing with a tray, said, That's policy compliant. For a second they laughed like regular coworkers on a regular morning. Then the feeling thinned because everybody knew decisions were being made somewhere else by people who did not smell like fryer oil at the end of the day. Mr. Albright came in early again, though Carla told him he was not scheduled until noon. He carried his cane and a paper bag from home. You planning to work for free now? Carla asked. I came to bring Annie something. Annie looked up. He held out a small pocket-sized notebook, unused, with a blue cover. For your hours. Annie took it carefully. I have a notebook. Now you've got one for business and one for school. Keisha leaned in. That's how you know you're official. Annie rubbed her thumb along the blue cover. Thank you, Mr. Albright. Don't thank me. Write things down. Memory gets tired when people argue with it. Back in the conference room, finance had reached the cost section. The chief financial officer, Raymond Cole, did not raise his voice, but his numbers had teeth. Free meals across all stores will cost millions annually. William nodded. What is turnover costing us? Raymond paused. That depends how we calculate replacement, training, lost productivity. Calculate it honestly. We are. No, William said. We calculate it like a spreadsheet can't feel the floor. Add the cost of hiring someone, training them, losing them, hiring again, burning out the crew left behind, slowing service, comping angry customers, and paying settlements when a manager goes unchecked. Raymond looked down at the paper. That number will be higher. Yes, communications spoke next. There is also brand risk in acknowledging this publicly. Margaret added, we can implement internal corrections without centering the story on the dumpster incident. William's hand went to Mr. Albright's notebook. You keep trying to avoid the image because it is ugly. It should be ugly. A clean statement won't fix what a dirty alley revealed. Clayton leaned forward. William, with respect, you are too close to this. I was too far from it. That was the problem. The words came out sharper than he intended, but he did not take them back. Ellen from legal turned a page. If we approve emergency implementation, we need a defined review period. 30 days, Diane said. Weekly reporting, payroll corrections, meal usage, hotline volume, food safety compliance, employee retention, waste reduction. Raymond said. And if stores abuse it, Diane answered. Then we correct the abuse. We don't deny meals because we fear paperwork. William looked around the table. This company sells food. We built our name on feeding families. Yesterday I learned some of our employees call closing shift the hungry shift. Did any of you know that? No one answered. They call it that because the rush is too busy for breaks, the waste policy blocks safe leftovers, and some managers treat food like leverage. That ends. Margaret's face on the screen was still. Are you asking for a vote? No. I am informing you of emergency action under operational authority for the Cleveland District and requesting immediate approval for a 30-day expansion to 5 regions. Clayton's jaw shifted. That is aggressive. So was the harm. At the store, Annie checked the staff fridge before lunch. Carla had taped a handwritten sign to the door. Staff meals are available for anyone working 6 hours or more. No questions. Wash hands. Label time. Don't be greedy. Don't be shy. Annie read the last line twice. Don't be shy. She thought of the dumpster, the way she had hidden the burger deep in her bag. Then she opened the fridge and saw wrapped sandwiches, salads, fruit cups, and water bottles marked with times. No names. No shame. A new cashier named Tessa stood near the doorway, twisting her fingers. Is it really okay? Annie looked at her. Tessa was older than Annie, maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes and a wedding ring she kept turning. Yeah, Annie said. If you're working the hours, take the meal. My husband's hours got cut. I just didn't want anybody thinking. They don't get to think anything, Annie said. Then she softened. Chicken wrap's good. Take that one before Luis does. Tessa smiled a little and reached in. Annie stepped back, feeling something shift in a small but real way. Maybe fair plate was not only a policy. Maybe it was a door opening quietly in a break room. By late afternoon, the vote came through. 5-region expansion approved for 30 days. Narrow margin. Heavy conditions. Weekly review. Legal oversight. Communications. Restrictions. But approved. Diane called Carla first, then asked to speak to Annie. Annie took the phone near the back hallway. Hello? It passed, Diane said. Annie leaned against the wall. Fair plate? 5 regions, 30 days, starting Monday. Annie looked toward the kitchen, where Tessa was eating half a chicken wrap on her break, and Luis was arguing with Keisha over which sauce belonged on fries. Did Mr. Harrington have to fight hard? Diane gave a tired laugh. Let's say he earned his salary today. Annie looked down at the blue notebook Mr. Albright had given her, tucked into her apron pocket. What happens after 30 days? We prove it works. And if they don't want to see that, then we make the proof too plain to ignore. After the call, Annie did not announce anything. She finished her shift. She checked her printed hours before leaving. She packed a staff meal for Ruth because Carla said family counted when there was extra and safe was safe. Then she took the bus home with the blue notebook in her lap. Ruth was at the table when Annie walked in. You look different. I do? Like somebody handed you trouble and you decided to organize it. Annie set the meal bag down and told her fare plate had passed in 5 regions. Ruth listened without interrupting, then opened the bag, inspected the food, and nodded. Good. That's all? Ruth looked at her over her glasses. Baby, when hungry people get food without begging, that is not small. But don't dance yet. Systems know how to smile and stall at the same time. Annie sat across from her. You always got to make victory behave. Somebody has to raise it right. Annie laughed, then opened the blue notebook. On the first page, she wrote the date. Under it, she wrote, Fare plate approved, 5 regions, 30 days, no sign-out sheet. She paused, then added one more line. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is a meal in the staff fridge with nobody's name on it. Across town, William stood once more behind the one-way glass above the Cleveland store. He watched the crew move through closing. Not as numbers, not as labor units, as people. Annie crossed the prep area with a clipboard Carla had given her, checking times on wrapped food before it went into the staff fridge. Mark stood beside him. You know the board will be watching for failure. William did not look away from the floor below. Then we'd better stop giving them hungry people to overlook. The first week of Fairplate did not feel like a revolution. It felt like labels, clipboards, short meetings in the break area, and Carla reminding everyone to write the time clearly on the food bags. It felt like Luis arguing that hot sauce should count as a basic right, Keisha telling him nobody wanted his opinions before coffee, and Mr. Albright checking the staff fridge with the seriousness of a man inspecting a church donation box. For Annie, the change lived in small moments. Tessa taking a wrap sandwich without asking permission. Malcolm from the grill sitting down for his meal break, instead of eating over a trash can between orders. Keisha filing a complaint about a shift lead's comment, and receiving a call from Diane the same afternoon. Not a lecture from the person she complained about. The old rules had trained people to expect punishment. The new ones had to teach them how not to flinch. But not everyone wanted to learn. On Thursday afternoon, just before the dinner rush, Annie was in the prep area writing times on sealed meals, when Carla came through the back hallway with her radio in hand. Annie, she said, calm but firm. Stay in here for a minute. Annie looked up. Why? Carla did not answer fast enough. That was enough. From the front of the store came a voice Annie knew before it formed words. Vance Miller. I just want to talk to Mr. Harrington. I know he's here. Annie's hand stopped over the label. The marker tip pressed too hard and left a black dot beside the time. Carla stepped closer. You don't have to go out there. I'm not hiding in the back. I didn't say hide. I said choose. That helped. Annie set the marker down and wiped her hands on a towel. Her heart had picked up, but her feet moved. She followed Carla toward the front, where the dining area had thinned after lunch. William was near a corner table with Diane and Mark, reviewing the 5-region rollout. Vance stood 10 feet away from them in a gray jacket, no badge, no company shirt. He looked rougher than before, but not humbled. Anger had kept him fed. A security officer from the shopping center stood near the door, hand resting on his belt, waiting for William's call. Vance turned when Annie came out. There she is. Carla moved slightly in front of Annie. Annie touched her arm once. I'm okay. William's face changed when he saw her, not with alarm, but with concern he did not try to perform. Annie, you don't need to be part of this. Vance laughed. Of course she does. This whole circus is because of her, Diane said. Vance, you were instructed to communicate through counsel. I don't have counsel money, Diane. I had a job until you people decided to ruin me. You ruined yourself, Carla said. Vance pointed at her. Stay out of it. William's voice cut through. You don't give orders here anymore. Vance looked back at him. And she does? A girl who was pulling food from a dumpster last week? Annie felt the old burn rise in her face. The dining area seemed too bright. A customer at the soda machine paused, cup in hand. Luis came out from behind the counter, followed by Keisha. Mr. Albright stood from a booth with one hand on his cane. Vance saw them gathering and smiled without warmth. Look at that. Whole little rescue team. Annie stepped past Carla. Her voice was not loud, but it reached him. "Why are you here?" That threw him off. He had come ready for William, ready for Diane, ready to accuse. He had not come ready to answer Annie. "I want my job back." "You came to ask me that?" "No, I came to show everybody what this is." He held up his phone. "You played hungry," cried to the owner. "And now everybody's supposed to pretend you're some kind of leader." William moved forward. "Put the phone away." Vance ignored him. "Tell them, Annie. Tell them how you took food from the trash and turned it into a promotion." Annie looked at the phone, then at his face. She could feel the room waiting. But this time the waiting did not crush her. It gave her a place to stand. "I took food because you held my pay." "You keep saying that, because it's true. You were new. There were errors." Mark opened his folder. "There were manual holds placed from your account." Vance snapped at him. "Of course you've got papers. Rich people always have papers when they want to bury somebody." Annie's hands trembled, so she clasped them in front of her apron. "You told me to eat from the trash because I wouldn't let you touch me." The words landed plain. No shouting. No drama. Just truth. Set down where everyone could see it. Vance's face flushed. "Careful?" "No," Annie said. "I was careful for months. I laughed when I didn't want to. I moved around you in the storage room. I checked my schedule like it was a warning. I stayed quiet because I needed rent money. I was careful enough." Keisha's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Louis stood with his jaw tight. Mr. Albright's hand closed over the top of his cane. Vance took a step toward Annie. The security officer moved at once, but William was quicker. "Stop," William said. Vance stopped, breathing hard. William turned to Diane. "Do we have the final investigation summary?" Diane's folder was already in her hands. "Yes." "Read the findings." Vance's mouth opened. "You can't do this in front of staff." William looked at him. "You humiliated her in front of staff. You leaked her image to the public. You don't get privacy for the truth." Diane read without raising her voice. "Wage holds placed without payroll justification. Meal breaks recorded while employees were working. Schedule retaliation after refused personal advances. Harassing comments corroborated by multiple employees. Unauthorized access to security footage. Edited footage leaked after suspension. Sharing internal information with other managers after formal notice." Each sentence took something from Vance, not his anger. That stayed. But the costume of being misunderstood began to fall away. When Diane finished, William faced him. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Your access is revoked. Your final wages will be processed according to law. Any further contact with Annie or any employee involved in this investigation will be handled through legal channels." Vance gave a bitter laugh. "Final wages. Nice. I get paid on time, huh?" William did not blink. "Yes, because we will not become you to punish you." That answer seemed to irritate Vance more than cruelty would have. He looked at Annie one last time. "You think this makes you better than me?" Annie felt the answer rise from somewhere steady and tired. "No. I think what you did made you smaller than you had to be." Vance's face twisted. "You don't know how the world works." "I know exactly how it works," she said. "That's why I kept records." Mr. Albright gave a small nod, proud as a grandfather at a graduation. The security officer stepped forward. "Sir, time to leave." Vance backed toward the door. "This company will regret this." William answered. "No, this company regrets keeping you too long." The officer escorted him outside. The door closed with the small chime it always made. The same chime that welcomed customers, ended shifts, and now marked the end of Vance Miller's power in that store. For a few seconds, no one moved much. The fryer still worked. The drive-through headset beeped. A receipt printer spit out an order for 2 chicken boxes and a sweet tea. Carla looked around. "All right. We still have dinner rush in 20 minutes. Luis, check fries. Keisha, front counter. Malcolm, restock sauces. Annie, with me." That ordinary instruction steadied everyone more than any speech could have. Annie followed Carla into the back. Once they reached the prep area, Carla handed her the marker. "You stopped at 3:40 p.m., Carla said, pointing to the label. Annie looked at the food bag on the counter and almost laughed. Her hands were still shaking. Carla's voice softened. You did fine. I don't feel fine. Fine is not required. Standing was enough. Annie wrote the time again, slower this time. 3:40 p.m. Chicken sandwich. Safe for staff fridge until 7:40 p.m. William entered a moment later but stayed near the doorway. Annie? She turned. I'm sorry that had to happen here. She held the marker between both hands. Maybe it needed to. Diane came in behind him. We are expanding the investigation to every region, not 5, all of them. The board approved an emergency review after the findings on Vance. Annie absorbed that. All stores? All 900, William said. The number should have felt too large. Instead, Annie thought of one break room, one staff fridge, one person afraid to take a meal. Then another. Then another. What do you need from me? She asked. William's expression changed, just slightly. Only what you choose to give. Annie looked toward the front, where Keisha's voice carried a polite greeting to a customer, where Louise called out that fries were fresh, where Mr. Albright was already wiping tables as if history had not just shifted beside the soda machine. I'll help with fair plate, Annie said. But I'm not the face of your apology. William nodded. Then be the voice of what works. That, she could carry. By closing, the staff fridge was full, the waste bin was half what it had been, and every employee had checked their hours before leaving. Annie stayed 10 extra minutes, paid and approved, to help Carla seal the shelter bags. At the bottom of the list, Carla added a note, no discarded safe food. Annie read it twice. Then she took out the blue notebook Mr. Albright had given her, and wrote the same line on the next clean page. No discarded safe food. Under it, after a pause, she added, no discarded people. The next morning, Annie found a new uniform shirt folded on the break room table. It was the same black cotton as the old one, same Harrington logo over the chest, but beside it sat a small box with her name written on a sticky note. Carla was at the coffee machine, pretending not to watch. What's this? Annie asked. Open it. I don't like surprises at work. That is a healthy attitude. Open it anyway. Annie lifted the lid. Inside was a name badge. Not the thin plastic one that said crew member. This one had her name engraved cleanly, with a second line beneath it. Assistant Shift Manager, Trainee. Annie read it once, then again. The words did not feel like they were meant for her hand. Carla came over and leaned against the counter. Diane dropped it off this morning. Training starts Monday. You'll do 3 days with me, 2 days with Diane, and some online modules that will make you question the meaning of life. Annie touched the badge with one finger. I didn't ask for this. I know. I don't know how to be a manager. Nobody does at first. Some folks never learn and still get the keys. Annie gave a small breath. People are going to talk. People talk when rain falls. Doesn't make the rain personal. Luis came in carrying a case of napkins and stopped when he saw the badge. Well, look at that. Annie closed the box halfway. Don't start. I was just going to say congratulations. No, you weren't. I was going to say congratulations and then ask if I can get weekends off forever. Keisha came in behind him and snatched the badge from the box before Annie could stop her. Assistant Shift Manager Trainee, she read, drawing out every word. That's a lot of letters. You need a bigger shirt. Annie reached for it. Give it back. Keisha handed it over with a grin that softened at the edges. For real, Annie. You earned it. Those last 3 words made Annie look away. Earned it. For days, people online had said she had been handed something, because she was pitied, because William felt guilty, because bad press needed a pretty ending. But Keisha had seen the shifts, the notes, the fear, the way Annie had stood in front of Vance with her voice shaking and still finished the sentence. Carla tapped the badge. Put it on. Annie looked down at her old name tag. The plastic was scratched near the corner. It had survived fryer grease, sanitizer, and one night pressed against a backpack in an alley. She unclipped it slowly, not because she was sad to lose it, but because it had carried her through the last version of herself. The new badge clicked into place. For a second, nobody joked. Then Luis said, "Does this mean you can tell Mark from corporate to stop standing where we need to walk?" Carla pointed at him. Go stock napkins. The first training shift began with the safe instead of the fryer. Carla showed Annie how to count the drawer, how to check deposits, how to mark a cash discrepancy without making the cashier feel accused before the facts were known. Annie listened hard, writing in the blue notebook Mr. Albright had given her. "Slow down," Carla said. "I don't want to miss anything." "You will miss things. That's why we check." Annie wrote that down too. Around noon, Diane arrived with a binder and 2 coffees. She handed one to Carla, then offered the other to Annie. "I don't drink coffee," Annie said. Diane looked surprised. "You work food service and don't drink coffee?" "Tea. My grandma says coffee makes people rude faster." Carla lifted her cup. "Your grandmother and I disagree in Christian love." Diane laughed and set the second cup aside. "I'll remember tea next time." They sat in the corner booth after lunch rush. Diane walked Annie through scheduling basics. Availability, overtime, fair rotation, not punishing people with bad shifts, for speaking up. Annie noticed how often management language made simple decency sound like a technical skill. "So if Keisha reports a problem," Annie said, "she shouldn't suddenly lose Saturday hours." "Correct. And if Luis asks about overtime, he shouldn't get stuck cleaning grease traps all week." "Correct. And if somebody refuses to work alone with a person who made them uncomfortable, that doesn't make them difficult." Diane paused. "Correct." Annie closed the binder halfway. "Why did anyone need a policy to know that?" Diane looked tired. "Because too many companies wait until harm has a form number." That answer stayed with Annie. In the afternoon, William came by without Mark for once. He wore a plain coat and entered through the front like any customer. A few people noticed, but he did not make it a moment. He ordered a black tea after Carla told him Annie did not drink coffee. When Annie saw the cup in his hand, she almost smiled. "You trying to prove something?" "No, I'm trying not to be rude faster." Carla laughed from the counter. "Ruth Carter is already improving corporate culture." William handed Annie a sealed envelope. "This is your training agreement. Paid hours, mentor assignment, review schedule. Take it home. Read it with your grandmother before signing." Annie accepted it but did not open it. "Why me?" William seemed to have expected the question. "Because you pay attention. So do other people." "Yes. And I should have asked them sooner." "That's not an answer." He nodded. "Because you kept your dignity when someone tried to take it. Because you saw the weak points in this store and explained them without turning cruel. Because leadership is not being the loudest person in the building. Sometimes it is being the one who refuses to let the wrong thing become normal." Annie looked toward the kitchen, where Keisha was helping Tessa with the register, and Luis was labeling staff meals with exaggerated neatness because Carla had threatened to make him rewrite anything sloppy. "I'm still scared," Annie said. William did not insult her by saying she should not be. "Of what?" "Making a mistake. People waiting for me to mess up. Vance being gone but not really gone from how folks think. And," she glanced at the badge, "being put up front so the company looks better." William lowered his voice. "If I do that, you tell me. Would you listen? I didn't before all this. I am trying to now. It was not perfect." That made it easier to believe. By closing, Annie had checked 3 timesheets, corrected 1 missed break before it became a problem, and helped Tessa handle a customer who kept calling her sweetheart while changing his order 4 times. Annie did not make a scene. She stepped beside Tessa and said, "Sir, she's trying to help you. Let's keep this simple." The man grumbled, but he stopped. Tessa whispered after he left, "Thanks." Annie whispered back, "You were doing fine." Near the end of the shift, Carla gave Annie the keys to the office for the first time. "Just to lock the drawer," Carla said. "Don't look so dramatic." Annie held the ring in her palm. Metal keys. Ordinary things. But she remembered Vance using keys like a crown. Like proof he could open and close every door that mattered. In Annie's hand, they felt different. Not power over people, responsibility toward them. She locked the drawer, checked the handle twice, and returned the keys. Carla nodded. "Good. That's it?" "That's it. You want fireworks? Bring your own." After work, Annie took the bus home with the envelope in her backpack and the new badge still clipped to her shirt under her coat. She kept touching it through the fabric. At home, Ruth opened the door before Annie knocked twice. "You're late." "Training." Ruth's eyes dropped to the badge. She did not speak right away. Annie suddenly felt nervous in a way she had not felt with William or Diane or Carla. "Well?" Annie said. Ruth stepped closer and adjusted the badge so it sat straight. Her fingers were careful. Her eyes were wet, but her voice held. Stand tall when your name is written right. Annie looked down. Ruth lifted her chin gently. No. Let me see you. So Annie stood in the small doorway of their cold apartment wearing a fast food uniform, tired shoes, and a badge that still felt too new. Ruth looked at her as if she were wearing a graduation gown. Your mother would have wanted this, Ruth said. Annie's throat closed. It's just trainee. Nothing honest is just anything. They sat at the kitchen table and read the training agreement together. Ruth asked sharp questions about pay, hours, supervision, and whether Annie could step away if reporters came around again. Annie wrote those questions in the blue notebook. Later, after Ruth went to bed, Annie took out the old crew member tag and placed it beside the folded brown paper bag. Then she placed the new agreement beside them. 3 pieces of one story. What she had been called, what she had survived, and what she was learning to become. She opened the blue notebook and wrote one line before turning off the lamp. A title does not give you dignity, but the right one can stop people from pretending they never took it. Monday came with a new checklist taped beside the time clock. Fair plate operating steps. Check the staff fridge at open. Mark sealed food by time and item. Confirm meal breaks before lunch rush. Print hours before clock out. Report concerns through the independent line, not the store manager. No discarded safe food. Luis read it with his arms folded. This thing has more rules than my aunt's Thanksgiving kitchen. Carla walked past with a case of cups. And yet both feed people, so respect the system. Keisha leaned over Annie's shoulder. Assistant shift manager trainee. Does this mean you're in charge of making Luis write legibly? Annie looked at Luis's first label. The time looked like it had been written during an earthquake. Yes, she said. Rewrite that. Luis put a hand to his chest. Power changed you. No, your handwriting did. The joke helped. It made the new policy feel less like a corporate announcement and more like something the crew could touch. Still, Annie knew the first real test would not come during a quiet morning. It would come when the line reached the door, when the drive-thru wrapped around the building, when somebody called in sick, when a manager had to choose between the old shortcut and the new promise. The test came before noon. A delivery was late. The chicken prep ran behind. The lunch rush arrived early because the weather report warned of freezing rain by evening. Customers came in with damp coats, tight schedules, and no patience. The headset chirped without mercy. Carla worked the line with sleeves rolled up. Annie moved between prep and counter, checking bags, fixing an order, helping Tessa when a man complained that his sandwich had pickles after he had asked for no pickles. By 1:20, Luis had not taken his meal break. Annie saw it on the break board. She also saw the line, the orders, Carla at the fryer, Keisha on register, Malcolm moving fast enough to sweat through his cap. The old Annie would have waited. The old store would have waited. A break missed during rush could be corrected later on paper, and later on paper was where people disappeared. Annie walked to Carla. Luis needs break. Carla glanced at the board, then at the orders. Now? He hit 6 hours 15 minutes ago. Luis heard them from the fry station. I'm good. Annie turned. That's not the rule. I said I'm good. You also said hot sauce was a basic right. We don't build policy on your judgment. Keisha laughed without looking up from the register. Carla gave Annie one quick look. Not annoyance. Assessment. Then she nodded. Luis, 20 minutes. Annie. Fries. Malcolm. Move to bagging. Luis hesitated. For real? For real, Carla said. Go sit down before she writes you up for refusing dignity. Luis pulled off his gloves, a little embarrassed, a little relieved. He went to the break area and took a staff meal from the fridge. Annie stepped into the fry station. Oil heat pressed against her face. Orders kept coming. Nothing collapsed. No customer went unfed. The store did not fall apart because one worker ate on time. That mattered. At 2:05, Diane arrived with Mark and 2 trainers from headquarters. Annie expected clipboards and stiff smiles. But Diane came straight to the break board. How's it going? Carla pointed with her pen. Messy, but honest. That may be our new motto. Mark checked the staff fridge log. You've distributed 11 staff meals today. 12. Annie said from the fry station. Tessa just took one. She forgot to mark it because the register jammed. Tessa looked over. I was coming back. I know. I marked it. Mark wrote something down. Annie narrowed her eyes. Is that good writing or bad writing? He looked up, surprised. Good writing. Corporate people write the same face for both. Diane smiled. Mark did not, but only because he was trying not to. Later, when the rush slowed, Diane asked Annie to walk through the process with the trainers. Annie wiped her hand. This shelf is for sealed food still inside the safe window, Annie said. Time, item, initials of the person who checked it. No employee names for who takes it. If it sits past the time, it moves out. No guessing. One trainer, a man named Peter, asked, how do you prevent misuse without a sign-out sheet? Annie looked at him. What kind of misuse? People taking more than they need. They work here. They're not raccoons. Diane coughed once into her fist. Peter flushed. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Annie said. She kept her voice level because Carla had taught her that calm could hold more weight than heat. If someone takes 2 meals, maybe ask yourself if 1 meal isn't enough for what's waiting at home. If supplies run short, manage the supply. Don't shame the person. Peter wrote that down with more care than before. Mr. Albright came in for his shift while they were still talking. He looked at the trainers, then at Annie. You teaching school now? Apparently. Make them take notes. People forget what costs them nothing. That line ended up in Mark's notebook. By the second week, Fairplate had changed the rhythm of the store. Not perfectly. Nothing changed perfectly. Someone forgot to label a batch of wraps, and Carla made everyone redo the cooler training. A shift lead from another location complained that staff meals slowed closing. Then Diane made him work one evening at Cleveland and time the process himself. It added 9 minutes. He stopped complaining. The shelter pickup started on Friday nights. A church van from Street Matthews pulled into the side lot at 8:30, driven by a retired postal worker named Mrs. Donnelly, who wore red gloves and carried her own thermometer. I don't take mystery food, she told Annie the first night. Neither do we, Annie said, handing over the log. Mrs. Donnelly read every line, checked 2 bags, and nodded. Good, you'll do, Louise whispered. That's her version of a standing ovation. The first delivery was not large. 23 sealed sandwiches, 11 fruit cups, 8 salads, 2 trays of wrapped biscuits. Food that once would have gone into a dumpster before anyone argued over it. Annie helped load the insulated boxes into the van. Freezing air stung her cheeks. She looked toward the dumpster. The lid was closed. No loose bags spilling over. No paper trays sliding across wet pavement. It was still there, but it no longer felt like the center of the alley. Mrs. Donnelly shut the van door. You coming with us sometime? Annie blinked. Food does a person good twice when they see where it lands. Annie thought of Ruth at the kitchen table, of the brown paper bag, of the first staff meal she carried home openly. Maybe, she said. Good. Maybe keeps the door cracked. On the last day of the 30-day review, William returned to Cleveland. He did not stand behind the glass at first. He put on a visitor badge and spent 2 hours in the store. He watched Annie handle a schedule question, saw Carla correct a food label, listened while Keisha trained Tessa on register language that kept customers from blaming workers for policy, and stood quietly as Mr. Albright showed Mark how his notebook system had become a daily log. At 4, William asked Annie if she had a minute. She checked the board before answering. 7. He almost smiled. 7 is plenty. They sat at the same corner table where the first draft had been marked up. William set a report between them. 30 days, he said. 5 regions. Meal break. Compliance up. Payroll complaints down. Waste disposal down. Staff turnover down 9% in pilot stores. Shelter partners want expansion. Annie read the first page. She understood more of the language now than she had a month ago. Numbers still felt cold, but these were attached to faces. What happens next? She asked. The board votes on full rollout tomorrow. She looked up. All stores? All stores. Are they going to fight it? Yes. At least you're honest. I'm learning. Annie closed the report. Tell them about Tessa. William waited. She took a meal the first day and apologized for it. 3 times. Nobody should have to apologize to a refrigerator. William wrote that down. Tell them about Luis. He tried to skip break because he thought helping the line mattered more than eating. That's not loyalty. That's training people to disappear. He wrote that down too. And tell them about the shelter van. Not in a fancy way. Just tell them the dumpster is lighter and people are still getting fed. William looked at her. Would you tell them yourself? Annie's answer came fast. No. He nodded. All right. She studied him. You're not going to push? No. Good. Then she looked toward the front counter, where Keisha was laughing at something Mr. Albright had said. I'll write something. You can read it. No name. That would help. It's not for them. Who is it for? Annie thought for a moment. For the workers who won't be in that room. That night, she wrote at the kitchen table while Ruth watched a game show with the volume low. She wrote slowly, crossing out words that sounded too polished. She did not want pity. She did not want applause. She wanted plain truth. By the time she finished, the page was short. A meal break is not a favor. A paycheck is not a favor. Safe work is not a favor. Food thrown away while workers go hungry is not efficiency. It is failure with a clean label. Fair plate does not make people weak. It lets them work without being punished for being human. Ruth read it once, then handed it back. Well? Annie asked. Ruth reached for her tea. Sounds like something a person might ignore only if they worked hard at it. The next morning, William read those words to the board. He did not name Annie. He did not mention the brown paper bag. He did not describe the alley. He simply read the page, then set it beside the 30-day report, and waited. Clayton Pierce asked about cost. Raymond Cole answered before William could. Turnover savings were already measurable. Waste hauling was down. Legal exposure from wage complaints was being contained by correcting the problem instead of hiding it. Operations admitted the meal process had added less time than expected. HR reported hotline usage was high but useful. Communications said public response had shifted from outrage to cautious approval. Margaret Vale asked the final question. William, is this policy reform? Or is this penance? William looked at the page Annie had written. It's management, he said. The kind we should have practiced all along. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. Full rollout, 900 stores, 90 days for implementation, weekly reporting, public standards, independent complaint channel, staff meals, safe food sorting, community pickup partnerships where available. At the Cleveland store, Annie was checking sauce inventory when Diane called. It passed, Diane said. Annie sat down on an overturned crate. All stores? All stores. Annie pressed one hand to her forehead. She was quiet so long, Diane asked if she was still there. I'm here, Annie said. Outside. The dinner rush was beginning. Someone needed more napkins. Luis was calling for fries. Carla was telling Malcolm not to stack boxes like a leaning tower. The work went on. Ordinary as breath. Annie stood, slipped the blue notebook into her apron pocket, and went back to the line. That was how the change entered the world. Not with thunder. With a meal in a fridge, a paycheck on time, a van at the side door, and a young woman who had once hidden food in a torn backpack now making sure nobody else had to. 1 year later, the alley behind the Cleveland Harrington Chicken and Grill smelled less like waste and more like cold air, cardboard, and work finished properly. The dumpster was still there. Annie noticed it every time she took the shelter log out to Mrs. Donnelly's van. It sat against the brick wall with its lid closed, smaller than she remembered, though she knew the company had not changed the size. What had changed was what went into it. Fewer sealed bags, fewer wrapped sandwiches, fewer meals that had spent all day being sold to customers and all night being denied to the people who made them. Annie stood near the back door with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a marker clipped to her apron. Her badge no longer said trainee. It read, Annie Carter, store manager. She still felt the weight of it when she walked into the building each morning. Not a heavy weight, a serious one. The kind Ruth said a person should carry with both hands and a straight back. Inside, The store was getting ready for the anniversary event, though Annie refused to call it that. "It sounds like we're celebrating ourselves," she had told William the week before. William had nodded. "What would you call it?" "A check-in." So the company called it a Fair Plate Community Check-in, and Annie rolled her eyes at how corporate still managed to make plain words wear dress shoes. But she let it pass because the people invited were the right ones: workers from nearby stores, shelter volunteers, church drivers, district trainers, a few older customers who had become regulars, and the crew who had been there when the first staff meal bag went into the fridge. No red carpet, no balloons, no giant poster of Annie. She had made that clear. At 9 in the morning, Ruth arrived in her good navy coat, moving slower than she used to but still greeting everyone like she owned a little piece of every room she entered. Mr. Albright offered his arm. Ruth looked at it, then at him. "You trying to help me or flirt with me?" Mr. Albright smiled. "At my age, ma'am, I try to do both efficiently." Ruth laughed so hard Annie had to look away before she started crying in front of the biscuit warmer. Keisha was now assistant shift lead and wore her badge like she had dared anyone to question it. Luis ran training for new kitchen staff and had somehow turned food labels into a competition for neatest handwriting. Carla had been promoted to district training manager, though she still came into the Cleveland store often enough to tell people when they were stacking boxes wrong. William arrived without cameras, as promised. Mark came with him, carrying a folder and looking less stiff than he had a year before. Diane was already there, speaking with Mrs. Donnelly near the staff fridge. Annie met William by the side entrance. "You kept it small," she said. "You told me to. You've gotten better at listening. I had a demanding teacher." Annie gave him a look. "Don't make that sweet." He smiled a little. "Yes, ma'am." The event began in the dining area after the breakfast rush. Customers still came in. Orders still moved. Nobody shut down the store because Annie said the whole point of Fair Plate was that dignity should work during business hours, not only when someone cleared space for it. Diane read the first-year numbers from a single sheet. 900 stores implemented. Millions of staff meals served. Thousands of payroll corrections made before employees had to ask twice. Waste disposal reduced across the chain. Community partners in hundreds of cities receiving safe, sealed food. Turnover down. Complaints up at first, then better resolved. That last number mattered to Annie. Silence had never been proof of peace. When Diane finished, William stepped forward. He did not stand behind the counter or under the logo. He stood on the floor, where employees passed by with trays and headsets and receipt paper tucked in their pockets. "A year ago," he said, "I looked down from the office above this store and saw something I should never have needed to see to understand. One of our employees had worked a full shift and was searching for food behind the building. Her pay had been held. Her break had been ignored. Her dignity had been treated like something a manager could take from her." Annie kept her eyes on the staff fridge. She had agreed he could say that much, not her private details, not the parts of the story that lived at Ruth's kitchen table, just the truth that had to be owned in public. William continued, "Fair Plate did not begin because this company was generous. It began because this company was wrong. Annie Carter helped us understand the difference." Heads turned toward her. Annie hated that part, but Ruth caught her eye from the front row and tapped 2 fingers lightly against her own chest. "Stand tall." William looked at Annie, then back to the room. Annie did not need a savior. She needed the wages she earned, the safety she deserved, and a company willing to stop looking away. No one clapped at first. The sentence needed a second to settle. Then Mr. Albright started, slow and steady, and the room followed. Annie walked up only because Ruth gave her the look that had moved generations of stubborn people. She stood beside William, not behind him. "I'm not giving a speech," she said. Carla called from the back, "That sounds like the start of a speech." A few people laughed. Annie waited until it passed. "I'll just say this. A meal break is not kindness. A paycheck is not kindness. Safe work is not kindness. Those things are supposed to be normal. Fair Plate matters because it makes normal harder to steal." The room changed again. Not loud, not dramatic, just attentive. Annie looked toward the kitchen. "And to anybody working in a place where you have to smile at disrespect to keep your hours, write things down. Tell somebody safe. Don't let one person with a key make you believe they own every door." This time Ruth clapped first. After the check-in, the day returned to work. Annie liked that best. Keisha trained a new cashier through lunch. Louise corrected labels with comic seriousness. Mrs. Donnelly picked up 12 insulated bags for the shelter run. Ruth sat in a booth drinking tea William had brought her himself. "You're the cup man," Ruth said. William blinked. "I'm sorry. Your face used to be on the cups." Mark coughed into his hand. Annie turned away, smiling. William sat across from Ruth. "I suppose it was." Ruth stirred her tea. "You learned something this year?" "A great deal." "Good, don't graduate from it." Late that evening, after the check-in ended and the dinner rush faded, Annie took the final shelter bags to the van. The air was cold enough to bring back the memory of that first night. Same alley, same brick wall, same patch of pavement near the dumpster. Mrs. Donnelly loaded the bags and checked the list. "Light waste tonight. That's the goal." "Funny thing," Mrs. Donnelly said, closing the van door. "A lot of folks talk about feeding people. Fewer learn how to stop wasting what was already enough." After the van pulled away, Annie stayed outside for a moment. She walked to the dumpster and stood where she had once crouched with shaking hands. She could almost feel the old backpack strap cutting into her palm. The fear, the hunger, the shame someone else had tried to hand her. The back door opened, and William stepped out. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said. "You're not." They stood a few feet apart, looking at the closed lid. "I still think about that night," William said. "Me too. I wish I had come down sooner." Annie looked at him. "You came down. That doesn't erase what happened." "No, but it changed what happened next." William accepted that with a nod. Annie looked up toward the one-way glass above them. "You still use that office?" "Sometimes." "Good. Keep looking down." "I do." "No," she said, turning back to him. "Not just watching. Looking." He understood the difference now. "I will." Inside, Ruth called through the cracked door. "Annie Carter, don't stand in the cold teaching billionaires all night." Annie laughed. "Coming, Grandma." She took one last look at the dumpster, then at the staff fridge visible through the back hallway, stocked for closing crew and marked with clean labels. A year ago, she had hidden food in a torn backpack because shame had been built into the rules. Tonight, food moved from hands to hands in the open. The night Annie reached into the trash, she wasn't throwing away her dignity. She was reaching for the life a cruel man tried to keep from her. And because one billionaire finally looked down, an entire company was forced to look within. The lesson of Annie's story is that dignity should never depend on wealth, position, or power. A paycheck is not charity. A meal is not a favor. Respect is not something workers should have to earn by staying silent. Sometimes injustice hides in ordinary places. A missed break, a delayed check, a cruel manager, a meal thrown away while someone goes hungry. But when one person chooses to see the truth instead of looking away, change can begin. Annie's courage reminds us that the people closest to pain often understand the solution better than those standing above it. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.